The 7th Legion emerged from the crucible of Terra's unification wars during the 30th millennium, forged in the Emperor's grand design to reclaim humanity's birthworld from the techno-barbarian warlords and gene cults that had carved it into feuding territories. While the Thunder Warriors had served as the Emperor's initial instruments of conquest, the Legions Astartes represented a more refined and sustainable approach to galactic warfare. Among these 20 legions, the 7th would distinguish itself through an unwavering dedication to methodical warfare and an almost supernatural ability to break sieges that had stymied lesser forces for decades. The initial recruitment pools for the 7th Legion drew heavily from the mountain fortress cities of the Himalayan ranges, where communities had survived Old Night by constructing elaborate defensive networks carved into living rock. These recruits brought with them an instinctive understanding of fortification and siegecraft, having spent generations defending their high-altitude settlements against raiders and mutant hordes. The gene seed implantation process favored candidates who demonstrated not only physical resilience, but also the mental fortitude required for prolonged defensive actions. Unlike some legions that sought recruits with aggressive temperaments, the 7th selection criteria emphasized patience, analytical thinking, and the ability to maintain discipline under extreme duress. The Emperor's strategic vision for the 7th Legion crystallized during the later phases of Terran unification, particularly during the siege of the Caucasian fortress states. These massive defensive complexes had withstood conventional assault for months, their layered fortifications and underground tunnel networks proving nearly impregnable to direct attack. The 7th Legion's methodical approach to siege warfare proved decisive in these campaigns, as they systematically identified and exploited structural weaknesses while maintaining their own defensive positions against counterattacks. Their success rate in breaking fortified positions quickly earned them deployment to the most challenging siege operations across Terra. The Legion's early organizational structure reflected their specialized role in siege warfare. Companies were organized around specific siege functions rather than the more flexible arrangements adopted by other legions. Breacher companies specialized in assault operations against fortified positions, equipped with specialized boarding shields, siege hammers, and melta charges designed to penetrate defensive barriers. Support companies provided covering fire and logistical backing, while reconnaissance companies mapped enemy fortifications and identified weak points for exploitation. This functional specialization allowed the 7th Legion to operate with mechanical precision during siege operations, each unit understanding its role within the larger tactical framework. Command hierarchy within the early 7th Legion emphasized merit-based advancement and technical expertise over pure combat prowess. Officers were expected to demonstrate mastery of siege engineering principles, fortification design, and the complex logistics required to sustain prolonged siege operations. The Legion maintained detailed archives of successful siege techniques, defensive innovations, and lessons learned from failed assaults. This institutional knowledge became a cornerstone of their tactical doctrine, passed down through generations of Astartes and continuously refined through practical application. The gene seed characteristics of the 7th Legion manifested in ways that complemented their siege warfare specialization. Beyond the standard Astartes enhancements, recruits developed enhanced spatial reasoning abilities and an almost preternatural sense for structural integrity. Veterans could assess the load-bearing capacity of walls by touch, identify potential collapse points in enemy fortifications through careful observation, and calculate blast patterns with remarkable accuracy. These abilities, while subtle compared to the more dramatic mutations seen in other legions, proved invaluable during siege operations, where precision and calculation often determined success or failure. Early campaigns during the Great Crusade established the 7th Legion's reputation across the galaxy. The siege of Rust World Caraxes demonstrated their ability to adapt traditional siege techniques to alien environments. The planet's surface consisted of vast mechanical cities built by a long-dead civilization, their automated defenses still functional after millennia of abandonment. While other Imperial forces had attempted direct assault with predictable casualties, the 7th Legion spent months studying the defensive patterns, mapping power distribution networks, and identifying central control nodes. Their eventual breakthrough came through systematic shutdown of defensive sectors, allowing Imperial forces to advance through deactivated zones, while the Legion maintained secure corridors against remaining automated systems. The compliance of Hive World Nereza showcased the Legion's defensive capabilities when their siege turned into a prolonged defensive action. Xeno's raiders had established fortified positions throughout the planet's industrial complexes, using the dense urban terrain to their advantage. The 7th Legion's initial assault successfully captured key positions, but subsequent Xeno's counterattacks threatened to overwhelm Imperial forces. Rather than retreat, the Legion transformed their captured positions into elaborate defensive networks, using salvaged materials and their engineering expertise to create interlocking fields of fire. The resulting defensive complex held against repeated Xeno's assaults for 8 months, allowing reinforcement fleets to arrive and complete the planet's compliance. The methodical nature of the 7th Legion's warfare became legendary among Imperial army units assigned to joint operations. Where other Astartes legions might charge directly into enemy positions, the 7th Legion approached each engagement as an engineering problem requiring systematic solution. They constructed detailed scale models of enemy fortifications, tested assault techniques against mock-ups, and rehearsed complex maneuvers until every participant could execute their role flawlessly. This preparation often extended siege operations beyond what other commanders considered reasonable, but the resulting casualty rates consistently vindicated their approach. Recruitment practices evolved as the Legion expanded beyond Terra, though they maintained strict adherence to their original selection criteria. Worlds with strong defensive traditions or challenging environmental conditions proved fertile recruiting grounds. The ice-bound fortress cities of Vostok Prime provided recruits accustomed to operating in extreme cold while maintaining complex defensive positions. The underground hab complexes of Terran's sister world Luna contributed candidates with expertise in void-sealed construction and low-gravity operations. Each recruitment world added specialized knowledge to the Legion's collective expertise while maintaining the core characteristics that define their approach to warfare. The Legion's armament and equipment reflected their specialized role, with extensive use of siege-specific weapons and defensive gear. Breacher squads carried reinforced boarding shields capable of deflecting heavy weapons fire, while assault teams wielded specialized tools for penetrating fortified positions. The Legion's artificers developed innovative siege equipment, including portable void shields for advancing troops and modular fortification components that could be rapidly deployed to secure captured positions. This equipment standardization allowed units from different companies to coordinate seamlessly during complex siege operations. Training regimens within the 7th Legion emphasized endurance and precision over speed and aggression. Recruits spent years mastering the fundamentals of siegecraft, learning to calculate structural loads, design defensive positions, and coordinate complex multi-unit operations. Live-fire exercises used captured enemy fortifications as training grounds, allowing new Astartes to practice their skills against realistic defensive positions. Veterans would deliberately create challenging scenarios, forcing trainees to adapt their techniques to unexpected complications and equipment failures. The Legion's relationship with the Mechanicum of Mars proved particularly fruitful during these early years. Tech priests appreciated the 7th Legion's methodical approach to warfare and their respect for proper engineering principles. Joint operations often resulted in innovative siege technologies, combining Astartes' tactical expertise with Mechanicum technical knowledge. These collaborations produced specialized siege engines, improved fortification designs, and enhanced communications equipment that became standard throughout the Legion. Notable victories during the early Great Crusade established tactical doctrines that would define the Legion for millennia. The siege of Fortress Moon Genna required the Legion to conduct void-based siege operations, adapting their techniques to zero-gravity environments while maintaining their characteristic methodical approach. The compliance of the Forge World Lucidia demonstrated their ability to overcome technologically superior opponents through careful analysis and systematic exploitation of discovered weaknesses. Each successful campaign added new techniques to the Legion's tactical repertoire while reinforcing their reputation as the Emperor's premier siege specialists. The gene seed stability of the 7th Legion proved remarkably consistent during these early years, with mutation rates significantly below the average for Astartes legions. This stability allowed for reliable recruitment expansion while maintaining the specific characteristics that enhanced their siege warfare capabilities. Medical analysis revealed that the Legion's gene seed produced subtle but consistent enhancements to spatial reasoning, structural analysis, and long-term planning abilities. These cognitive improvements, combined with standard Astartes physical enhancements, created warriors ideally suited for the complex demands of siege warfare. The discovery of Rogal Dorn on the ice world of Inwit marked a pivotal moment in the 7th Legion's evolution from accomplished siege specialists to the Emperor's most trusted defenders. When the infant Primarch's gestation pod crashed through the frozen atmosphere of Inwit during the chaotic scattering caused by the ruinous powers, it landed in a realm already shaped by the harsh realities of defensive warfare. The ice world existed as a collection of fortress cities connected by treacherous overland routes, where survival depended entirely on the strength of one's walls and the discipline of one's defenders. The ruling house of Inwit discovered the child among the wreckage of his pod, recognizing immediately that this was no ordinary foundling. Even as an infant, Dorn displayed an uncanny ability to assess his surroundings with calculating precision, his pale eyes tracking movement and analyzing patterns with an intensity that unnerved his adoptive family. The young Primarch's physical development proceeded at an extraordinary pace, but more remarkable was his intuitive grasp of defensive architecture and strategic planning. By his 10th year, Dorn was redesigning the fortress city's defensive positions, identifying weaknesses that had gone unnoticed by engineers with decades of experience. The ice world of Inwit demanded constant vigilance from its inhabitants. Massive ice storms could bury entire settlements within hours, while the planet's unstable geology created sudden chasms that could swallow unwary travelers. More dangerous still were the human raiders who emerged from the outer reaches of the Inwit cluster, pirates and renegades who had adapted to the harsh conditions and preyed upon the more civilized fortress cities. These raiders had learned to use the planet's treacherous weather patterns as cover for their attacks, striking during ice storms when defensive sensors were blinded and communication systems failed. Dorn's rise to leadership within the Inwit cluster came through a combination of tactical brilliance and unwavering moral authority. When the young Primarch reached adolescence, a confederation of raider clans launched the largest coordinated assault in the cluster's recorded history. Traditional defensive strategies had always focused on weathering such attacks until the raiders exhausted their supplies and withdrew, but Dorn recognized that this approach would only invite future aggression. Instead, he proposed a radical restructuring of the cluster's defensive doctrine, transforming isolated fortress cities into mutually supporting strongpoints connected by heavily fortified supply routes. The implementation of Dorn's defensive network required unprecedented cooperation between the traditionally independent fortress cities of Inwit. Each settlement had to contribute resources and manpower to construct the massive fortified highways that would link them together, while also accepting standardized defensive protocols that superseded local traditions. Many leaders initially resisted these changes, viewing them as threats to their autonomy, but Dorn's methodical presentation of tactical advantages gradually won over even the most stubborn holdouts. His ability to demonstrate how individual fortress cities would benefit from the collective defensive network proved more persuasive than any appeal to abstract principles of unity. The construction of Inwit's defensive network showcased Dorn's emerging genius for large-scale fortification projects. Rather than simply building walls and towers, He designed integrated defensive systems that channeled attacking forces into predetermined kill zones while providing multiple fallback positions for defenders. The fortified highways included underground bunker complexes that could shelter entire populations during extended sieges, while surface installations provided overlapping fields of fire that made direct assault prohibitively costly. Supply depots were positioned to ensure that any section of the network could maintain itself independently for months, eliminating the single points of failure that raiders had previously exploited. When the Raider Confederation finally launched their assault, they encountered defensive preparations unlike anything in their experience. The traditional hit-and-run tactics that had served them well against isolated targets proved useless against Dorn's integrated network. Attacking forces found themselves funneled into carefully prepared ambush sites, while their attempts to bypass strong points only led them into secondary defensive positions. The Raiders' mobility advantage evaporated as they became bogged down in prolonged siege operations against positions specifically designed to maximize defender advantages while minimizing attacker capabilities. Dorn's personal leadership during the defense of Inwit revealed characteristics that would define his approach to warfare throughout his career. Rather than directing operations from a secure command bunker, the young Primarch moved constantly between threatened positions, his presence providing both tactical coordination and inspirational leadership. His ability to assess battlefield conditions with mechanical precision allowed him to redeploy forces with perfect timing, reinforcing weak points just before enemy breakthroughs while maintaining pressure on attacking formations. Veterans of the campaign later described his command style as simultaneously reassuring and demanding, inspiring absolute confidence while accepting nothing less than perfect execution of orders. The philosophical foundations of Dorn's approach to warfare crystallized during these early campaigns on Inwit. Unlike some military leaders who viewed conflict as an arena for personal glory or tactical innovation, Dorn understood warfare as a grim necessity requiring systematic application of proven principles. His defensive doctrine emphasized preparation over improvisation, viewing proper planning and methodical execution as moral imperatives rather than mere tactical preferences. This perspective shaped his interactions with subordinates, as he demanded the same rigorous attention to detail from his officers that he applied to his own strategic planning. The young Primarch's concept of duty extended far beyond simple military obligation to encompass a comprehensive worldview that prioritized collective welfare over individual ambition. On Inwit, this manifested in his insistence that fortress cities share resources and intelligence even when such cooperation provided no immediate benefit to the contributing settlement. Dorn argued that true security required each component of the defensive network to strengthen the whole, even at the cost of short-term disadvantages. This philosophy would later evolve into his unwavering loyalty to the Emperor and the Imperium, but its foundations were established during his formative years on the Ice World. Dorn's administrative capabilities proved as impressive as his military talents during his consolidation of the Inwit cluster. The integration of previously independent fortress cities required complex negotiations regarding resource allocation, command authority, and territorial boundaries. Traditional diplomatic approaches had failed repeatedly in the past, as each settlement's leaders prioritized their own immediate interests over broader strategic considerations. Dorn's success came through his ability to present these negotiations as engineering problems requiring systematic solutions rather than political competitions with winners and losers. The transformation of Inwit under Dorn's leadership created a model of defensive governance that would influence imperial military doctrine for millennia. Rather than ruling through personal charisma or inherited authority, Dorn established institutional frameworks that could function effectively regardless of individual personalities. Command structures were designed with clear hierarchies and defined responsibilities, while resource allocation followed predetermined protocols based on strategic requirements rather than political considerations. This systematic approach to governance reflected Dorn's fundamental belief that effective leadership required the subordination of personal preferences to logical analysis of objective requirements. The Primarch's relationship with the common soldiers and civilians of Inwit revealed another crucial aspect of his character. Unlike some leaders who maintained distance from their subordinates, Dorn regularly inspected defensive positions personally, speaking directly with sentries and maintenance crews to understand operational challenges at the most basic level. These interactions were not mere ceremonial gestures, but genuine fact-finding missions that informed his strategic planning. Soldiers quickly learned that the Primarch's questions were precise and purposeful, designed to identify potential improvements rather than to test their knowledge or loyalty. Dorn's physical presence during these years reflected the harsh environment that had shaped his development. Standing well over normal human height even before reaching full maturity, his frame carried the solid musculature of someone accustomed to physical labor in extreme conditions. His pale hair and weathered features bore the marks of Inwit's brutal climate, while his hands showed the calluses of someone who personally participated in construction projects rather than merely supervising them. Most striking were his eyes, which seemed to catalog and analyze everything they observed with mechanical precision, missing no detail that might prove tactically relevant. The defensive philosophy that Dorn developed on Inwit emphasized sustainability over spectacular victories. Rather than seeking to annihilate enemies through overwhelming force, his strategies focused on making aggression so costly that potential attackers would seek easier targets elsewhere. This approach required patience and discipline from defenders, who had to resist the temptation to pursue retreating enemies beyond the protection of their fortifications. Dorn's ability to maintain this strategic patience while under attack demonstrated the mental fortitude that would later make him the Emperor's most trusted defender. The integration of technology into Inwit's defensive network showcased Dorn's practical approach to innovation. Rather than pursuing cutting-edge developments for their own sake, he focused on proven technologies that could be manufactured and maintained reliably under harsh conditions. Communication systems were designed with multiple redundancies to ensure functionality during ice storms, while defensive weapons emphasized durability and ease of repair over maximum firepower. This pragmatic approach to technology would later influence the 7th Legion's equipment preferences and maintenance protocols. Dorn's educational background on Inwit combined practical engineering knowledge with classical military theory, creating a unique synthesis that would define his approach to warfare. The fortress cities maintained extensive libraries containing technical manuals and historical accounts of famous sieges, which the young Primarch studied with characteristic thoroughness. However, he never allowed theoretical knowledge to override practical experience, constantly testing academic concepts against real-world conditions. This balance between scholarly study and hands-on application would later enable him to adapt classical siege techniques to the exotic challenges of galactic warfare. The economic transformation of the Inwit cluster under Dorn's leadership demonstrated his understanding that military strength required solid logistical foundations. The construction of the defensive network created new trade opportunities between previously isolated settlements, while standardized defensive protocols reduced the resources required for local security. The resulting economic growth provided additional resources for military improvements, creating a positive feedback loop that strengthened the entire cluster. This experience taught Dorn that effective military leadership required attention to economic and social factors beyond purely tactical considerations. When the Emperor's Great Crusade finally reached the Inwit system, they found a civilization that had achieved remarkable stability through systematic application of defensive principles. The Emperor's recognition of his son was immediate and mutual, as both shared a fundamental commitment to humanity's protection through strength and unity. Dorn's integration into the imperial hierarchy proceeded smoothly, his proven administrative and military capabilities making him an obvious choice for positions of high responsibility. The philosophical alignment between father and son would prove crucial during the trials that lay ahead, as the galaxy's greatest challenges would require leaders capable of unwavering dedication to duty above all personal considerations. The reunion between Rogal Dorn and the Emperor transformed the 7th Legion from accomplished siege specialists into the Imperium's premier fortress builders and defensive strategists. When Dorn assumed command of his Gene sons, he found a legion already shaped by decades of methodical warfare, but one that had yet to reach its full potential. The Primarch's first act was to implement a comprehensive reorganization that would maximize the legion's effectiveness while preserving the tactical doctrines that had served them well during the early years of the Great Crusade. The compliance of the Inwit cluster served as the 7th Legion's first major campaign under their Primarch's direct leadership, though the term compliance hardly captured the complexity of the operation. The cluster contained dozens of inhabited worlds, each with its own defensive traditions and political structures. Many had maintained contact with Inwit itself, creating a loose confederation bound together by trade agreements and mutual defense pacts. Others had developed in isolation, their societies shaped by unique environmental challenges that had produced radically different approaches to survival and governance. Dorn's strategy for the Inwit cluster reflected his understanding that lasting compliance required more than simple military conquest. Rather than overwhelming each world with superior force, he approached the campaign as a massive construction project designed to integrate existing defensive networks into a unified Imperial system. The Legion's role became that of military engineers, working alongside local forces to identify strategic positions for new fortifications while upgrading existing defenses to Imperial standards. This approach minimized casualties while demonstrating the practical benefits of Imperial membership to populations that had survived for millennia through their own defensive capabilities. The ice world of Grendel's Gate presented the first significant challenge to this methodical approach. The planet's inhabitants had developed a sophisticated network of underground cities connected by maglev transport tunnels, their entire civilization existing beneath a surface scoured by constant radiation storms. Local defenders had turned their subterranean environment into an elaborate maze designed to confuse and trap invaders, with multiple false passages, concealed weapon emplacements, and chambers that could be sealed and flooded with toxic gases. Previous Imperial expeditions had suffered catastrophic losses attempting to navigate these defenses, their conventional assault tactics proving useless against an enemy that could appear and disappear through hidden passages. Dorn's solution required 3 months of careful preparation before the first Imperial forces entered the tunnel systems. Working from detailed surveys conducted by reconnaissance teams, Legion engineers constructed scale models of the underground network, identifying critical junctions and potential choke points. Rather than attempting to clear the entire system, the Imperial Fists focused on securing key transportation hubs that controlled access to major population centers. Specialized breacher squads advanced through predetermined routes, while support teams sealed alternative passages, gradually reducing the defenders' mobility advantage until resistance collapsed. The Siege of Hive Cluster Mordian demonstrated the Legion's ability to adapt their defensive expertise to offensive operations. The cluster consisted of 7 massive hive cities connected by elevated transport bridges, their combined population exceeding 2 billion inhabitants. Local rulers had declared independence from the emerging Imperium, fortifying the connection points between hives and establishing overlapping defensive zones that made direct assault extremely costly. The hive cities themselves were marvels of defensive architecture, their towering spires bristling with weapon batteries, while their foundations extended deep into the planet's crust. Rather than attempting simultaneous assaults on all 7 hives, Dorn identified the cluster's central transportation hub as the key to the entire defensive network. This facility controlled the flow of supplies and reinforcements between the individual hives, making it essential to their coordinated defense. The Imperial Fists constructed a series of fortified positions around the hub, gradually tightening their siege lines while maintaining their own supply corridors against counterattacks. The siege lasted 8 months, but the eventual capture of the hub facility forced the surrender of all 7 hives, without the massive casualties that direct assault would have required. The development of the Legion's distinctive combat doctrines accelerated during these early campaigns as Dorn refined their tactical approaches based on practical experience. The Primarch's emphasis on methodical preparation became institutionalized through detailed planning protocols that required extensive reconnaissance, detailed terrain analysis, and comprehensive logistical preparation before any major operation. These protocols often extended campaign timelines beyond what other Legion commanders considered reasonable, but the resulting casualty rates consistently vindicated the approach. Breacher companies evolved into highly specialized units, equipped with an array of siege-specific weapons and defensive equipment. Each squad carried reinforced boarding shields capable of deflecting heavy weapons fire, while individual Astartes wielded a combination of bolt weapons, melta charges, and specialized tools for penetrating fortified positions. The Legion's artificers developed modular siege equipment that could be rapidly assembled to meet specific tactical requirements, including portable void shields, modular bunker components, and specialized communications gear designed to function in hostile environments. The campaign against the Orc stronghold of Goros Reach showcased the Legion's ability to conduct siege operations against non-human opponents whose defensive approaches differed radically from human norms. The Orc fortress consisted of a chaotic amalgamation of scavenged materials welded together without apparent regard for structural integrity or defensive logic. Traditional siege techniques proved ineffective against fortifications that seemed to defy basic engineering principles while somehow maintaining their structural coherence through Orc ingenuity and sheer bloody-mindedness. Dorn's analysis of the Orc fortifications revealed that their apparent chaos concealed a crude but effective defensive strategy based on redundancy rather than optimization. The fortress contained dozens of potential strongpoints, any of which could serve as a final defensive position if other areas were overrun. The Orcs' approach to defensive warfare emphasized rapid improvisation and overwhelming firepower, rather than the careful positioning and interlocking fields of fire preferred by human defenders. This realization forced the Imperial Fists to develop new tactical approaches specifically designed to counter Orc defensive psychology. The Legion's solution involved systematic destruction of the fortress's infrastructure, rather than attempts to capture intact positions. Demolition teams identified load-bearing structures and power distribution networks, while assault squads created diversions that drew Orc defenders away from critical areas. The resulting campaign resembled an elaborate construction project in reverse, as Imperial forces methodically dismantled the fortress piece by piece, until the remaining Orc defenders found themselves trapped in isolated pockets without supplies or communication. Joint operations with other legions Astartes during the Great Crusade provided opportunities for the Imperial Fists to demonstrate their specialized capabilities, while learning from their Gene brothers' different approaches to warfare. The compliance of the Calth system brought them into contact with the 13th Legion, whose emphasis on tactical flexibility and rapid deployment complemented the Imperial Fists' methodical approach to siege warfare. The campaign required the capture of multiple fortified positions across several worlds, with each legion contributing their particular strengths to the overall effort. The siege of Fortress City Viridia on Calth's primary moon demonstrated the effectiveness of combined legion operations when properly coordinated. The 13th Legion's rapid assault companies created multiple diversions that drew defender attention away from the main Imperial Fists' advance, while the 7th Legion siege specialists systematically breached the fortress's outer defenses. The coordination required constant communication between Legion command elements, as each force had to adjust their timing based on the other's progress. The fortress fell within 6 days, a remarkable achievement considering that previous estimates had suggested a campaign lasting several months. Operations alongside the 10th Legion during the Gardenal compliance revealed significant differences in tactical philosophy that nonetheless produced effective results when properly managed. The 10th Legion's preference for rapid, aggressive assaults initially seemed incompatible with the Imperial Fists' methodical approach, but Dorn recognized that these differences could be leveraged to create tactical advantages. The 10th Legion's shock assaults could create opportunities for the Imperial Fists to establish fortified positions in enemy territory, while the 7th Legion's defensive expertise allowed them to hold captured ground against counterattacks. The Siege of Hive Gardenal Prime required both legions to operate outside their preferred tactical frameworks. The Hive's defenses were designed to channel attacking forces into predetermined kill zones, making the 10th Legion's usual assault tactics extremely hazardous. Conversely, the Hive's active defenses and mobile garrison made traditional siege approaches impractical for the Imperial Fists. The solution emerged through careful coordination of both legions' capabilities, with the 10th Legion's assault companies creating breaches that the Imperial Fists could exploit, while the 7th Legion's defensive positions provided secure bases for the 10th Legion's operations. The development of the Imperial Fists' siegecraft during this period incorporated lessons learned from encounters with dozens of different defensive philosophies and construction techniques. Each successful siege added new techniques to the Legion's tactical repertoire, while reinforcing fundamental principles that remained constant regardless of enemy approaches. The Legion's archives grew to include detailed analyses of fortress designs, defensive strategies, and siege techniques from across the galaxy, creating an institutional knowledge base that would prove invaluable during future campaigns. Fortress construction became as important to the Legion's mission as fortress destruction, as the expanding Imperium required secure bases and defensive positions throughout newly conquered territories. The Imperial Fists developed standardized fortress designs that could be adapted to local conditions while maintaining consistent defensive capabilities. These designs emphasized sustainability and self-sufficiency, allowing Imperial garrisons to maintain their positions even when cut off from reinforcement for extended periods. The construction of Fortress Meridian on the world of Castellax demonstrated the Legion's ability to create defensive positions that could withstand sustained assault while serving as bases for further expansion. The fortress incorporated lessons learned from siege operations across the galaxy, featuring multiple defensive lines, underground supply networks, and weapon emplacements designed to cover all possible approaches. Construction required 2 years and involved coordination between Legion engineers, Mechanicum tech priests, and local labor forces, but the resulting fortification became a model for Imperial defensive architecture throughout the sector. The Legion's role in establishing defensive networks across newly conquered worlds extended beyond simple fortress construction to encompass comprehensive security planning for entire systems. This responsibility required the Imperial Fists to consider factors ranging from orbital defense platforms to planetary communication networks, ensuring that Imperial worlds could coordinate their defenses against external threats while maintaining internal security. The complexity of these projects demanded expertise in fields ranging from void warfare to civil engineering, pushing the Legion to develop capabilities far beyond their original siege warfare specialization. The integration of Mechanicum technology into Imperial Fists operations accelerated during the middle years of the Great Crusade, as both organizations recognized the benefits of cooperation. Tech priests appreciated the Legion's systematic approach to engineering problems and their respect for proper construction techniques, while the Imperial Fists benefited from access to advanced technologies and manufacturing capabilities. Joint projects produced innovations in siege equipment, fortification design, and defensive systems that became standard throughout the Imperial military. The Siege of Forge World Lucidia required unprecedented cooperation between the Imperial Fists and Mechanicum forces, as the planet's defenses incorporated technologies that neither organization fully understood individually. The Forge World's ruling tech priests had fallen to heretical beliefs that led them to reject Imperial authority, forcing a compliance action against opponents who possessed intimate knowledge of Imperial military capabilities. The planet's defenses included experimental weapon systems, adaptive shield generators, and automated defensive networks that could learn from and counter conventional assault techniques. Dorn's approach to the Lucidia siege emphasized intelligence gathering and technological analysis over immediate assault. Legion reconnaissance teams spent months mapping the Forge world's defenses, while Mechanicum specialists analyzed captured defensive technologies to identify potential vulnerabilities. The resulting siege plan required precise timing and coordination between multiple specialist units, as each defensive system required specific countermeasures that had to be implemented simultaneously to prevent the defenders from adapting their strategies. The establishment of the Imperial Fists fortress monastery on Terra marked a significant milestone in the Legion's evolution, providing them with a permanent base that reflected their growing importance within the Imperial hierarchy. The fortress incorporated architectural elements from across the galaxy, creating a synthesis of defensive techniques that represented the Legion's accumulated expertise. More importantly, the facility served as a training ground where new recruits could master siege techniques against realistic defensive positions, while veterans could experiment with new tactical approaches. The Legion's recruitment practices expanded during this period to include candidates from worlds throughout the growing Imperium, though selection criteria remained focused on the mental and physical characteristics that had originally defined the 7th Legion. Worlds with strong defensive traditions or challenging environmental conditions continued to provide the most suitable recruits, but the Legion also began accepting candidates from Forge worlds and Hive cities where technical expertise and discipline were highly valued. This diversification of recruitment sources added new perspectives to the Legion's tactical development while maintaining their fundamental character. Training regimens evolved to incorporate lessons learned from campaigns across the galaxy, with particular emphasis on adapting siege techniques to exotic environments and non-human opponents. The Legion maintained detailed records of every siege operation, analyzing both successes and failures to identify principles that could be applied to future campaigns. This systematic approach to tactical development ensured that hard-won experience was preserved and transmitted to new generations of Imperial Fists, rather than being lost when veteran warriors fell in battle. The outbreak of the Horus Heresy found the Imperial Fists scattered across the galaxy's outer reaches, their companies engaged in compliance actions and fortress construction projects that had taken them far from the light of Terra's sun. When the first fragmentary reports of Istvan III reached scattered Imperial forces, many dismissed them as garbled communications or enemy propaganda. The concept that the War Master himself could turn against the Emperor seemed so fundamentally impossible that even hardened veterans struggled to process the implications. For Rogal Dorn and his Legion, the initial confusion gave way to grim determination as the scope of the betrayal became undeniable. The 7th Legion's loyalty never wavered during those dark early days when uncertainty plagued many Imperial forces. Their gene seed carried within it an unshakable dedication to duty that manifested as absolute fidelity to the Emperor's vision for humanity. Where other legions might debate the political implications of the Civil War or seek to understand the War Master's motivations, the Imperial Fists approached the crisis with characteristic directness. Horus had betrayed his oath to the Emperor, therefore he must be stopped. The simplicity of this analysis masked the profound strategic challenges that lay ahead, but it provided the moral clarity necessary for the trials to come. Dorn's recall to Terra came through direct astropathic communication from the Emperor himself, transmitted with such psychic force that it reached even the most distant Imperial Fists companies simultaneously. The message carried an urgency that transcended normal military communications, bearing the weight of absolute authority that brooked no delay or interpretation. Within hours of receiving the summons, Dorn had issued orders for the entire Legion to converge on Terra with all possible speed, abandoning ongoing campaigns and construction projects that represented years of careful planning and preparation. The journey back to humanity's birth world took months even at maximum warp speed, as scattered companies had to navigate increasingly dangerous warp routes while avoiding systems that might have fallen to the traitors. Imperial Fists, strike cruisers and battle barges formed impromptu convoy groups for mutual protection, their void shields raised against both physical threats and the growing psychic turbulence that marked the galaxy's descent into civil war. Each passing day brought fresh reports of worlds declaring for the War Master or falling silent entirely, painting a picture of an Imperium tearing itself apart from within. The Emperor's appointment of Dorn as Praetorian of Terra formalized responsibilities that the Primarch had already begun assuming during his journey home. The title carried with it absolute authority over Terra's defenses, superseding the traditional command structures of the Imperial Army and Adeptus Custodes in matters relating to the planet's security. This unprecedented grant of power reflected the Emperor's complete trust in his son's defensive capabilities, but it also placed enormous pressure on Dorn to justify that faith through successful preparation for the siege that everyone knew was coming. The Imperial Palace, as Dorn found it upon his return, was certainly formidable, but its defenses had been designed for ceremonial purposes rather than withstanding assault by Space Marine legions equipped with the most advanced weapons in the galaxy. The palace's towering spires and elaborate architectural flourishes created numerous weak points that attacking forces could exploit, while its vast open courtyards provided insufficient cover for defenders attempting to repel assault troops. Most critically, the palace's defensive systems had been optimized for dealing with conventional threats rather than the superhuman capabilities and exotic weapons that traitor legions would bring to bear. Dorn's analysis of the palace's defensive requirements led to the most ambitious fortification project in human history, transforming the seat of imperial power into a fortress capable of withstanding prolonged siege by multiple Space Marine legions. The scale of the undertaking required mobilizing resources from across the Sol system, as entire Forge worlds were converted to producing defensive materials, while construction crews numbered in the millions worked around the clock to implement Dorn's designs. The Primarch personally supervised every aspect of the project, his eidetic memory allowing him to track thousands of simultaneous construction efforts while ensuring that each component integrated properly with the overall defensive scheme. The outer defensive perimeter extended far beyond the palace proper, incorporating a series of fortified zones that would force attacking armies to fight through multiple defensive lines before reaching the palace itself. Each zone was designed as a complete defensive system capable of independent operation, with its own command centers, supply depots, and weapon emplacements. The zones were connected by underground tunnels and communication networks that allowed defenders to coordinate their efforts while remaining protected from orbital bombardment and aerial assault. The construction of the Eternity Gate's defensive complex exemplified Dorn's approach to the fortification project. The massive portal that served as the palace's primary entrance had originally been designed for ceremonial processions rather than military defense, its soaring architecture creating a natural choke point that could be heavily fortified. Dorn's modifications transformed the gate into a killing ground where attacking forces would face overlapping fields of fire from concealed weapon positions, while navigating obstacles designed to channel them into predetermined zones. The gate's foundations were reinforced with adamantium supports capable of withstanding direct hits from orbital bombardment, while its superstructure incorporated void shield generators that could deflect energy weapons and provide protection against aerial assault. The palace's interior defenses required equally extensive modification as Dorn prepared for the possibility that outer defensive lines might be breached. Corridors were narrowed and reinforced to prevent rapid movement by assault troops, while strategically placed blast doors could seal off entire sections of the palace if necessary. Hidden weapon emplacements were installed throughout the structure, their positions carefully calculated to provide maximum coverage while remaining concealed from advancing enemies. The throne room itself became the ultimate strongpoint, its approaches designed to funnel attackers into a series of interconnected kill zones where even Space Marine assault troops would struggle to advance. The mobilization of Terra's industrial capacity for the fortification project demonstrated the planet's transformation from a ceremonial capital into a fortress world. Manufactorums that had previously produced luxury goods for the imperial elite were converted to manufacturing defensive equipment, while mining operations expanded to provide the raw materials necessary for construction. The planet's population was organized into construction brigades supervised by Imperial Fists engineers, their efforts coordinated through a complex logistical network that ensured materials and workers reached their assigned positions without delay. The Legion's absence from the drop site massacre at Istvan V proved fortuitous for the Loyalist cause, as their presence on Terra allowed them to serve as a rallying point for Imperial forces scattered by the traitors' initial victories. Reports of the massacre reached Terra through surviving elements of the Raven Guard, Iron Hands, and Salamanders, bringing with them detailed intelligence about traitor capabilities and tactical approaches. This information proved invaluable for Dorn's defensive planning, as he could adapt the palace's fortifications to counter specific threats that the traitor legions had demonstrated during their betrayal. The Imperial Fists' role in rallying Loyalist forces extended far beyond simply providing a secure base on Terra. Dorn established communication networks that allowed scattered Loyalist units to coordinate their resistance efforts while providing intelligence about traitor movements throughout the galaxy. The Legion's reputation for reliability and defensive expertise made them natural leaders for the desperate efforts to maintain Imperial authority in sectors where traditional command structures had collapsed. Strike forces of Imperial Fists were dispatched to critical worlds where their presence could shore up Loyalist defenses or extract valuable personnel and equipment before traitor forces arrived. The Battle of Fall represented the Imperial Fists' first major engagement against traitor forces, as elements of the Legion encountered an Iron Warriors fleet while en route to Terra. The engagement began as a chance meeting between the two fleets in the Fall system, but quickly escalated into a running battle that would last for weeks as both sides committed additional forces to the engagement. The battle showcased the fundamental differences between the two legions' approaches to warfare, with the Imperial Fists emphasizing defensive positioning and coordinated fire support, while the Iron Warriors relied on aggressive assault tactics and overwhelming firepower. The Void Battle above Fall demonstrated the Imperial Fists' ability to adapt their defensive expertise to naval warfare, as Dorn's sons used their ships' superior armor and void shields to absorb punishment while maintaining disciplined fire patterns that gradually wore down the Iron Warriors' fleet. The battle's outcome remained uncertain for days as both sides fed reinforcements into the engagement, with neither legion able to achieve decisive advantage through conventional tactics. The engagement only ended when both fleets received orders to disengage and proceed to more critical theaters, leaving the Battle of Fall as an inconclusive but significant test of Loyalist resolve. Skirmishes with traitor forces throughout the Outer Sol system provided additional opportunities for the Imperial Fists to gather intelligence about enemy capabilities while testing their own tactical adaptations. These engagements typically involved small forces operating independently, as both sides sought to gather information about enemy dispositions, while avoiding major confrontations that might reveal their own strategic intentions. The Imperial Fists' methodical approach to these operations yielded valuable intelligence about traitor equipment modifications, tactical innovations, and command structures that had emerged during the early phases of the Civil War. The defense of the Jovian shipyards required the Imperial Fists to coordinate with naval security battalions and Mechanicum defense forces in repelling a series of raids by traitor reconnaissance elements. The shipyards represented critical strategic assets that both sides needed to control, as they possessed the capacity to construct and repair the largest classes of Imperial warships. The raids tested the defenders' coordination and communication systems, while providing the traitors with intelligence about the shipyard's defensive capabilities and production schedules. Dorn's strategic analysis during this period focused on the inevitable siege of Terra, while simultaneously preparing for the possibility that traitor forces might attempt to bypass the Sol system entirely. The Primarch recognized that Horus would eventually be forced to assault Terra directly, as the symbolic importance of the Emperor's throne world made it impossible for the Warmaster to claim legitimacy without controlling humanity's birth world. However, the timing and nature of that assault remained uncertain, forcing Dorn to prepare for multiple contingencies while maintaining the flexibility to adapt his defenses as new intelligence became available. The coordination between the Imperial Fists and other loyalist forces on Terra required careful negotiation of command authorities and tactical responsibilities. The Adeptus Custodes maintained their traditional role as the Emperor's personal guardians, while the Imperial Army provided garrison forces for the palace's outer defenses. The Sisters of Silence contributed their unique capabilities against psyker threats, while various knightly houses and noble militias offered additional manpower for defensive operations. Dorn's challenge lay in integrating these diverse forces into a coherent defensive plan while respecting their individual traditions and capabilities. The psychological preparation of Terra's defenders proved as important as the physical fortification of the palace, as the coming siege would test human endurance and resolve to their absolute limits. The Imperial Fists' unwavering discipline provided an example for other defenders to follow, while their systematic approach to defensive preparation helped maintain morale during the long months of construction and waiting. Dorn's personal presence throughout the defensive preparations reassured both military personnel and civilian workers that Terra's defenses were in capable hands, even as reports from across the galaxy painted an increasingly grim picture of the Imperium's situation. The establishment of supply networks capable of sustaining Terra's defenders during an extended siege required unprecedented coordination between military and civilian authorities. Food production facilities were expanded and hardened against attack, while ammunition manufactorums were dispersed throughout the planet to prevent single points of failure. Medical facilities were prepared to handle massive casualty loads, while communication systems were designed with multiple redundancies to ensure continued coordination even under the most adverse conditions. The training of Imperial Army units in siege defense tactics occupied much of the Imperial Fists' attention during the preparation period, as conventional military doctrine provided little guidance for the type of warfare that was coming. The Legion's veterans shared their expertise in defensive positioning, coordinated fire support, and siege survival techniques with Army officers who would be responsible for implementing these tactics during the actual siege. These training programs helped standardize defensive procedures across different units, while ensuring that all defenders understood their roles within the larger defensive scheme. Intelligence gathering efforts focused on tracking traitor force movements throughout the galaxy, while attempting to predict the timing and composition of the eventual assault on Terra. The Imperial Fists maintained contact with loyalist forces throughout the Imperium, gathering reports about traitor capabilities and intentions, while providing guidance for resistance efforts in occupied territories. This intelligence network provided early warning of major traitor movements, while helping Dorn refine his defensive preparations based on observed enemy tactics and equipment modifications. The arrival of Horus's armada in the Sol system marked the beginning of humanity's darkest hour, as the corrupted Warmaster brought with him a fleet so vast that it blotted out the stars themselves. The traitor forces had spent years gathering strength across the galaxy, absorbing renegade Imperial Army regiments, corrupted Mechanicum Forge worlds, and the twisted remnants of loyalist forces that had fallen to chaos during the long journey to Terra. When the invasion fleet finally translated from the warp at the system's edge, its composition revealed the true scope of the heresy's devastation. Alongside the expected traitor legions marched billions of cultists, mutant hordes spawned by warp exposure, and demon engines that defied the laws of physics through their unholy construction. Dorn's defensive preparations had transformed Terra into a fortress world unlike anything in human history, but even his methodical planning could not fully prepare for the scale of the assault that now descended upon humanity's birth world. The traitor fleet's approach followed predictable orbital mechanics, allowing the Imperial Fists to track their movements and prepare defensive responses. Yet the sheer magnitude of enemy forces strained every system that Dorn had put in place. Orbital defense platforms that had been designed to repel conventional invasion fleets found themselves overwhelmed by the concentrated firepower of multiple Space Marine battle barges, operating in coordination with corrupted Mechanicum vessels, whose weapon systems had been enhanced by demonic possession. The Outer System's defense stations fell within the first week of fighting, their garrisons overwhelmed by boarding actions conducted by traitor Astartes who had abandoned all pretense of honorable warfare. The defenders fought with desperate courage, but conventional Imperial army troops proved no match for Chaos Space Marines, whose armor had been blessed by dark gods and whose weapons channeled the raw power of the warp. The loss of these outer defenses forced Dorn to accelerate his timeline for the palace's final preparations, as the protective buffer that he had hoped to maintain around Terra evaporated under the traitor's relentless advance. The bombardment of Terra began 3 days after the outer defenses fell, as traitor warships moved into optimal firing positions and commenced systematic destruction of the planet's surface installations. The attack followed no conventional military doctrine, instead targeting civilian centers and cultural landmarks with the deliberate intention of breaking the defenders' morale through psychological warfare. Ancient monuments that had stood since the dark age of technology crumbled under the impact of macro cannon shells, while entire hive sectors disappeared in nuclear fire as the traitors demonstrated their complete abandonment of the laws of war that had once governed conflict between human armies. Dorn's response to the orbital bombardment demonstrated the effectiveness of his defensive preparations, as the palace's void shield generators absorbed the worst of the enemy fire, while underground bunker networks protected critical personnel and equipment. The shields flickered and sparked under the sustained assault, their generators straining to maintain coherent energy fields against weapons designed to crack open starship hulls, but they held long enough for the Imperial Fists to implement their counter-battery protocols. Hidden weapon emplacements throughout the palace complex returned fire with disciplined volleys that forced traitor vessels to maintain greater distances, reducing the accuracy and effectiveness of their bombardment. The first ground assault came simultaneously from multiple directions, as traitor forces established landing zones in the ruins of Terra's outer cities, while drop pods and assault boats delivered shock troops directly into the palace's defensive perimeter. The Imperial Fists had prepared for this moment through months of tactical planning and defensive construction, but the reality of facing their own Gene brothers in combat tested even their legendary discipline. The traitor Astartes who emerged from the landing craft bore the colors and heraldry of legions that had once fought alongside the Imperial Fists during the Great Crusade, their familiar battle cries now twisted into blasphemous invocations that made the very air tremble with unholy power. The defense of the Saturnine Wall became the first major test of the Imperial Fists' defensive doctrine against a coordinated assault by multiple traitor legions. The wall itself stretched for hundreds of kilometers around the palace's outer perimeter, its massive ramparts bristling with weapon emplacements and defensive positions that commanded overlapping fields of fire across the approaches. Dorn had designed the fortification to channel attacking forces into predetermined kill zones while providing multiple fallback positions for defenders who might be forced to withdraw under pressure. The wall's construction incorporated lessons learned from siege operations across the galaxy, creating a defensive system that could function effectively even when individual sections were overrun or destroyed. The Iron Warriors' assault on the wall's eastern sections demonstrated the fundamental differences between the two legions' approaches to siege warfare. Where the Imperial Fists emphasized methodical preparation and coordinated defensive fire, the Iron Warriors relied on overwhelming firepower and relentless pressure to break through enemy positions. Their siege engines hurled massive shells that carved craters in the wall's adamantium-reinforced structure, while assault squads advanced under cover of this bombardment, to establish footholds in the defensive perimeter. The attackers showed no concern for casualties, throwing wave after wave of troops against the Imperial Fists' positions in a grinding war of attrition that tested both sides' resolve to its absolute limits. The World Eater's simultaneous assault on the wall's northern approaches presented an entirely different challenge, as the Berserker Legion abandoned all tactical coherence in favor of frenzied charges that sought to overwhelm the defenders through sheer ferocity. Their assault troops had been driven beyond the edge of sanity by surgical implants that amplified their aggression while suppressing rational thought, creating warriors who felt no pain and knew no fear, but also possessed no capacity for tactical adaptation. The Imperial Fists found themselves facing enemies who would continue fighting even after sustaining wounds that should have been immediately fatal, their blood-maddened charges requiring concentrated firepower to stop. The defense of the Ultimate Gate tested the Imperial Fists' ability to coordinate multiple defensive systems while maintaining tactical flexibility under extreme pressure. The gate served as one of the primary access points to the palace's inner sanctums, its massive adamantium doors protected by overlapping void shields and surrounded by weapon emplacements that could deliver devastating firepower against approaching enemies. Dorn had personally supervised the gate's fortification, incorporating design elements from successful defensive actions throughout his career, while adapting them to the unique challenges of defending against Space Marine assault troops. The Emperor's Children's assault on the Ultimate Gate showcased the corrupting influence of chaos on once noble warriors, as the Perfectionist Legion had devolved into sensation-seeking degenerates who fought as much for the pleasure of inflicting pain as for any strategic objective. Their assault troops advanced in formations that seemed to dance rather than march, their movements coordinated to create patterns that were simultaneously beautiful and horrifying to observe. The weapons they carried had been modified with sonic amplifiers that could shatter armor and liquefy internal organs, while their own enhanced senses allowed them to perceive and exploit weaknesses that would be invisible to normal combatants. The fighting around the Ultimate Gate continued for 17 days without pause, as both sides fed reinforcements into a meat grinder that consumed entire companies without producing decisive tactical advantage for either force. The Imperial Fists' defensive positions channeled the attackers into narrow corridors where their superior numbers provided no advantage, while the gate's automated defenses continued operating even when their crews were killed or wounded. The Emperor's Children's assault troops adapted their tactics with each failed attack, learning to counter specific defensive measures while developing new approaches to the seemingly impregnable position. The breakthrough finally came when traitor forces managed to establish a foothold in the gate's outer courtyard, their assault troops using captured Imperial equipment to create makeshift fortifications that protected them from the defenders' counterattacks. The position allowed them to bring heavy weapons to bear against the gate's void shield generators, gradually wearing down the defensive systems through sustained fire. The Imperial Fists launched repeated counterattacks to dislodge the traitors, but each assault cost precious lives while failing to eliminate the threat to the gate's integrity. Dorn's personal intervention in the Ultimate Gate's defense demonstrated the Primarch's tactical brilliance and unwavering commitment to his duty as Terra's defender. Rather than simply reinforcing the existing defensive positions, he identified the fundamental weakness in the traitors' foothold and organized a coordinated assault that exploited their overextension. The attack required precise timing and coordination between multiple Imperial Fists companies, as they had to eliminate the traitor position while simultaneously maintaining the gate's other defenses against continued enemy pressure. The assault began with a concentrated bombardment from the palace's heavy weapons that forced the traitor troops to seek cover in their makeshift fortifications, temporarily reducing their ability to maintain suppressing fire against the Imperial Fists' positions. Breacher squads advanced under cover of this bombardment, their reinforced armor and boarding shields allowing them to close with the enemy despite the intense defensive fire. The fighting that followed was conducted at point-blank range with bolt weapons, chainswords, and power fists, as both sides abandoned ranged combat in favor of brutal melee that tested their enhanced physiology to its absolute limits. The recapture of the Ultimate Gate's outer courtyard cost the Imperial Fists nearly 200 battle brothers, but it restored the integrity of the defensive perimeter and demonstrated that the traitors could be defeated through proper application of tactical principles. The victory provided a crucial morale boost for the defenders throughout the palace complex, proving that even the corrupted legions were not invincible when faced with disciplined resistance. More importantly, it validated Dorn's defensive doctrine and justified the enormous resources that had been invested in the palace's fortification. The siege's middle phase saw the traitors adapt their tactics to counter the Imperial Fists' defensive advantages, employing increasingly exotic weapons and demonic allies that challenged conventional military responses. Chaos sorcerers summoned warp entities that could phase through solid matter, bypassing physical fortifications to attack defenders directly. Demon engines that combined mechanical components with bound warp entities proved resistant to conventional weapons, while possessing capabilities that defied rational analysis. These supernatural threats forced the Imperial Fists to develop new tactical approaches while maintaining their traditional emphasis on disciplined defensive fire. The coordination between the Imperial Fists and other Loyalist forces reached its peak during the defense of the Eternity Gate, as Dorn integrated Adeptus Custodes, Sisters of Silence, and Imperial Army units into a coherent defensive plan that maximized each force's particular strengths. The Custodes provided elite shock troops capable of matching traitor Astartes in single combat, while the Sisters of Silence countered psychic threats that conventional weapons could not address. Imperial Army units held secondary positions and provided supporting fire, their disciplined volleys adding to the overall defensive firepower, while freeing Astartes units for more critical assignments. The Eternity Gate's defenses had been designed as the ultimate test of any force attempting to breach the palace's inner sanctums, incorporating every lesson that Dorn had learned during his career as a siege specialist. The gate's approaches were dominated by overlapping fields of fire from concealed weapon positions, while the ground itself had been prepared with obstacles and kill zones that would channel attacking forces into predetermined areas. The gate's structure incorporated void shield generators, automated weapon systems, and blast doors that could seal off entire sections if they were overrun by enemy forces. The final phase of the siege began when Horus himself took direct command of the assault, his presence on the battlefield inspiring the traitor forces to new heights of ferocity, while simultaneously weakening the barriers between reality and the warp. The War Master's corruption by chaos had transformed him into something that was no longer entirely human, his enhanced capabilities allowing him to coordinate the assault with supernatural precision, while his very presence caused reality to warp and twist around him. The Loyalist defenders found themselves fighting not just against superior numbers, but against the fundamental laws of physics as chaos energy saturated the battlefield. The assault on the Vengeful Spirit represented Dorn's ultimate test as both a military commander and a loyal son of the Emperor. The decision to teleport aboard the War Master's flagship was born from desperate necessity rather than tactical preference, as the siege had reached a point where conventional defensive measures could no longer prevent the palace's fall. The Imperial Fists who accompanied their Primarch on this final mission understood that they were unlikely to return, but their gene seed's unwavering loyalty to duty overcame any personal concerns about survival. The boarding action aboard the Vengeful Spirit took place in corridors and chambers that had been twisted by chaos corruption into configurations that violated basic architectural principles. The ship's interior resembled a fever dream more than a functional starship, with passages that led to impossible destinations and rooms that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The Imperial Fists advanced through this nightmare environment with characteristic discipline, their training allowing them to maintain formation and tactical coherence even when confronted with sights that challenged their sanity. The Emperor's confrontation with Horus in the ship's command center marked the climax of the civil war that had torn the Imperium apart, but it came at a cost that would reshape humanity's future for millennia to come. The psychic battle between father and son transcended physical reality, their conflict playing out across multiple dimensions, while the material universe trembled under the strain of their opposing wills. When the Emperor finally struck down his corrupted son, the psychic backlash shattered the Chaos Force's coordination, while simultaneously inflicting wounds upon the master of mankind that would never fully heal. The Emperor's victory over Horus aboard the Vengeful Spirit ended the siege of Terra, but for the Imperial Fists, the conclusion of the civil war brought no sense of triumph or relief. As the surviving traitor forces fled into the Eye of Terror, and loyalist reinforcements finally reached the Sol system, Dorn and his remaining warriors found themselves confronting a failure so profound that it would reshape their legion's character for millennia to come. The Emperor lay entombed within the Golden Throne, his body broken and his consciousness barely tethered to the material realm, sustained only by the daily sacrifice of 1,000 psychers and the arcane machinery that the Mechanicum struggled to maintain. The sight of their Gene Father standing vigil beside the Golden Throne became seared into the memory of every Imperial Fist who witnessed it. Dorn's massive frame seemed diminished in the presence of the Emperor's shattered form, his shoulders bearing a weight that no amount of physical conditioning could prepare him for. The Primarch's weathered features, marked by months of constant warfare, now carried lines of grief that spoke to a pain deeper than any wound inflicted by bolt shell or chainsword. His pale eyes, which had once analyzed battlefield conditions with mechanical precision, now reflected a haunted quality that his Gene sons had never seen before. The immediate aftermath of the siege required the Imperial Fists to maintain their defensive positions, while Terra's infrastructure was gradually restored to functionality. The planet's surface bore scars that would never fully heal, with entire districts reduced to radioactive wasteland and ancient monuments obliterated by traitor bombardment. The palace itself stood as a testament to the siege's ferocity, its walls pockmarked with crater impacts and its corridors stained with the blood of loyalist and traitor alike. The Eternity Gate's adamantium structure showed stress fractures that spoke to the tremendous forces that had been brought to bear against it, while the Ultimate Gate's courtyard remained littered with the debris of destroyed vehicles and shattered weapons. Dorn's initial response to the Emperor's internment focused on practical concerns, as the Primarch threw himself into the task of organizing Terra's reconstruction with the same methodical intensity that had characterized his approach to siege warfare. Supply lines needed to be reestablished to bring food and materials to the devastated planet, while communication networks required extensive repair to restore contact with distant Imperial worlds. The palace's defensive systems demanded constant maintenance to ensure they could continue protecting the Golden Throne against future threats, while the complex machinery of the Emperor's life support systems required round-the-clock monitoring by teams of tech priests and Imperial Fists technicians. The psychological impact of the siege began to manifest among the Legion's survivors in ways that their training had not prepared them to handle. Battle brothers who had faced traitor Astartes without flinching found themselves unable to sleep, their enhanced memories replaying scenes of combat against former allies with perfect clarity. Veterans who had served since the Great Crusade's early days struggled to reconcile their understanding of the Space Marine legions as humanity's protectors with the reality of what their Gene brothers had become under Chaos corruption. The certainties that had once anchored their worldview lay in ruins alongside Terra's shattered monuments. The Legion's sense of failure centered on their perceived inability to protect the Emperor from harm, despite their role as his Praetorians. Every Imperial Fist understood that their primary duty had been to ensure the Master of Mankind's safety, yet he now lay broken within the Golden Throne, his voice silenced, and his guidance reduced to the faintest psychic whispers that only the most sensitive psychers could detect. The fact that Terra itself had been successfully defended provided no consolation to warriors who measured success solely by their ability to keep the Emperor from harm. Dorn's own guilt manifested in increasingly obsessive behavior as he sought to identify every decision that might have contributed to the siege's outcome. The Primarch spent countless hours reviewing tactical reports and defensive logs, analyzing each engagement for signs of weakness or missed opportunities that might have altered the campaign's trajectory. His quarters became filled with detailed maps and architectural plans as he attempted to redesign the palace's defenses to address every vulnerability that the siege had revealed. Sleep became a luxury that he could ill afford when there remained so much work to be done and so many failures to analyze and correct. The arrival of Guilliman and his 13th Legion provided temporary relief for Terra's exhausted defenders, but it also highlighted the extent to which the Imperial Fists had been diminished by their ordeal. The Ultramarines' pristine armor and disciplined formations contrasted sharply with the battered appearance of Dorn's warriors, whose equipment bore the scars of months of continuous combat. The 13th Legion's efficient approach to garrison duties and administrative tasks demonstrated capabilities that the Imperial Fists had once possessed, but now struggled to maintain due to their reduced numbers and psychological trauma. The implementation of the Codex Astartes created additional stress for the Imperial Fists as they grappled with fundamental changes to their organizational structure and tactical doctrine. Guilliman's reforms demanded the division of the legions into smaller chapters, each operating independently under the authority of the newly established High Lords of Terra. For the Imperial Fists, this meant abandoning the massive siege operations that had defined their identity in favor of more limited engagements that could be conducted by chapter-strength forces. The prospect of fragmenting their hard-won expertise across multiple independent organizations struck many veterans as a betrayal of everything they had learned during the Great Crusade. Dorn's resistance to the Codex Astartes reflected his deep-seated belief that the Imperial Fist's specialized knowledge would be diluted if distributed among successor chapters that lacked the institutional experience necessary to maintain proper siege doctrine. The Primarch argued that certain types of warfare required the concentrated expertise that only a full legion could provide, pointing to the recent siege as evidence of the need for large-scale defensive operations. His objections were based on practical military considerations rather than personal pride, but they placed him in direct opposition to his brother's vision for the future of the Astartes. The debate over the Codex's implementation created tensions between the two Primarchs that reflected deeper philosophical differences about the nature of duty and loyalty. Guilliman viewed the reforms as necessary safeguards against future corruption, arguing that smaller organizations would be less susceptible to the wholesale betrayal that had characterized the heresy. Dorn countered that the real protection against corruption lay in unwavering dedication to duty and proper indoctrination of recruits, qualities that could be maintained regardless of organizational size. The disagreement highlighted the different lessons that each Primarch had drawn from the Civil War's traumatic events. The resolution of the Codex crisis came only after months of increasingly heated discussions that threatened to create a new schism within the Loyalist forces. Dorn's eventual acceptance of the reforms reflected his recognition that continued resistance would serve no constructive purpose, while potentially undermining the unity that the Imperium desperately needed. The decision to comply with Guilliman's directives represented a personal sacrifice for the Primarch, as it required him to abandon organizational structures that had proven their effectiveness through centuries of successful campaigns. The formation of the Imperial Fist successor chapters proceeded with characteristic attention to detail, as Dorn ensured that each new organization received a core of experienced veterans capable of maintaining proper tactical doctrine. The Black Templars inherited the Legion's most zealous warriors, their fervent dedication to the Emperor's memory making them natural crusaders against the Imperium's enemies. The Crimson Fists received specialists in defensive warfare, their expertise in fortification construction and siege tactics preserving crucial knowledge for future generations. The Iron Fists carried forward the Legion's traditions of methodical planning and disciplined execution, their adherence to established protocols ensuring continuity with pre-heresy practices. The process of dividing the Legion's assets and personnel created logistical challenges that required months of careful planning to resolve properly. Equipment stockpiles had to be distributed equitably among the successor chapters, while ensuring that each organization possessed the specialized tools necessary for their assigned roles. Gene seed stocks required careful monitoring to prevent contamination or loss during the transfer process, while recruitment rights for specific worlds needed to be allocated to maintain sustainable force levels for each chapter. The Iron Warriors' challenge to single combat arrived at the worst possible moment for the Imperial Fists, as the Legion was still reeling from the psychological trauma of the siege, while simultaneously struggling to implement the Codex reforms. Perdurabo's message, delivered through captured Imperial communications equipment, represented a calculated insult designed to exploit the Imperial Fist's sense of honor and their current vulnerability. The Iron Warriors Primarch claimed that his legion had emerged victorious from the civil war despite fighting on the losing side, pointing to their successful withdrawal from Terra as evidence of their tactical superiority over Dorn's forces. The challenge itself was couched in terms that made refusal impossible for a legion that had built its reputation on accepting any defensive assignment regardless of the odds. Perdurabo proposed a meeting on the world of Sebastus IV, where the Iron Warriors had constructed a massive fortress complex designed to showcase their siege warfare capabilities. The challenge was ostensibly an opportunity for the two legions to settle their rivalry through honorable combat, but the terms heavily favored the Iron Warriors by requiring the Imperial Fists to assault prepared positions while operating far from their own supply bases. Dorn's acceptance of the challenge reflected the depth of his psychological wounds rather than sound tactical judgment. The Primarch's guilt over the Emperor's fate had created a need for redemption that overrode his normally careful analysis of operational requirements. The opportunity to prove the Imperial Fists' continued effectiveness through direct confrontation with their traditional rivals appealed to warriors who had spent months questioning their own capabilities and worth. The prospect of dying gloriously in battle offered an escape from the grinding burden of failure that had haunted the Legion since the siege's conclusion. The preparation for the Sebastus IV operation proceeded with the same methodical attention to detail that had characterized the Imperial Fists' approach to previous campaigns, but their planning was hampered by incomplete intelligence about the Iron Warriors' defensive preparations. Reconnaissance missions to the target world had been intercepted by Iron Warriors patrols, while astropathic communications suggested that Perdurabo had spent months fortifying his positions using techniques developed during the Civil War. The limited information available indicated that the fortress complex covered hundreds of square kilometers and incorporated defensive innovations that the Imperial Fists had not previously encountered. The Iron Warriors' fortress on Sebastus IV represented Perdurabo's attempt to create the perfect siege warfare laboratory, a testing ground where different defensive theories could be evaluated under actual combat conditions. The complex consisted of multiple interconnected strongpoints, each designed to test specific aspects of assault tactics while providing overlapping support to adjacent positions. The fortress incorporated lessons learned from the Siege of Terra, but it also featured innovations that reflected the Iron Warriors' exposure to chaos-enhanced technologies and construction techniques. The approach to Sebastus IV revealed the extent to which the Iron Warriors had prepared for the Imperial Fists' arrival. The system's outer planets had been seeded with automated defense platforms that engaged the Loyalist fleet, while transmitting detailed intelligence about Imperial Fists' ship configurations and tactical approaches. The planet itself was surrounded by orbital minefields and weapon satellites that forced the attacking fleet to follow predetermined approach vectors, channeling them into zones where the defenders could concentrate their fire most effectively. The initial orbital bombardment of the fortress complex produced disappointing results, as the Iron Warriors' defensive systems proved remarkably resistant to conventional naval weaponry. Void shields absorbed the worst of the Imperial Fists' fire, while underground bunker networks protected critical personnel and equipment from blast effects. The fortress's weapon emplacements returned fire with disciplined volleys that forced the Loyalist ships to maintain greater distances, reducing the accuracy and effectiveness of their bombardment. After 3 days of sustained fire, the fortress remained largely intact, while the Imperial Fists fleet had expended a significant portion of its ammunition reserves. The ground assault began with drop pod deployments that attempted to establish footholds within the fortress's outer perimeter, but the Iron Warriors had prepared extensively for this type of attack. Automated defense systems engaged the descending pods with concentrated fire, destroying many before they could reach the surface, while forcing others to land in predetermined zones where defenders could concentrate their response. The Imperial Fists who survived the landing found themselves facing prepared positions that channeled their advance into narrow corridors dominated by overlapping fields of fire. The fighting within the fortress complex quickly devolved into a grinding war of attrition that played to the Iron Warriors' advantages while negating many of the Imperial Fists' traditional strengths. The defenders' intimate knowledge of their own fortifications allowed them to coordinate their movements through hidden passages and concealed positions, while the attackers struggled to navigate unfamiliar terrain under constant enemy fire. Each captured position revealed new defensive lines that had to be assaulted in turn, creating a seemingly endless series of tactical challenges that consumed Imperial Fists' lives without producing meaningful strategic progress. The fortress's design incorporated psychological warfare elements that were specifically intended to demoralize attacking Imperial Fists. Captured Loyalist equipment had been incorporated into the defensive systems, forcing the attackers to advance under fire from their own weapons, while witnessing the desecration of their chapter's heraldry and traditions. The Iron Warriors had also constructed mock-ups of famous Imperial Fists victories, then systematically destroyed them in full view of the attacking forces to demonstrate their contempt for their rivals' achievements. The siege dragged on for weeks as both sides fed reinforcements into a meat grinder that consumed entire companies without producing decisive tactical advantage for either force. The Imperial Fists' disciplined assault tactics proved inadequate against defenses that had been specifically designed to counter their traditional approaches, while their reduced numbers prevented them from maintaining the sustained pressure necessary to overwhelm prepared positions. The Iron Warriors' defensive positions seemed to regenerate themselves overnight, as automated construction systems repaired damage and replaced destroyed equipment faster than the attackers could eliminate it. Dorn's personal intervention in the assault demonstrated his desperate need to justify the enormous casualties that the operation had already cost. The Primarch led assault teams directly against the fortress's most heavily defended positions, his presence inspiring his warriors to extraordinary acts of heroism, while simultaneously exposing him to enemy fire that claimed the lives of his bodyguards and companions. The sight of their Gene father bleeding from multiple wounds, while continuing to press forward against impossible odds, drove the Imperial Fists to new heights of desperate courage, but it also highlighted the futility of their situation. The breakthrough finally came when Imperial Fists engineers managed to identify a critical weakness in the fortress's power distribution network, but exploiting this discovery required a coordinated assault that would cost hundreds of additional lives. The attack succeeded in penetrating the fortress's inner sanctum, but the victory proved hollow when the defenders revealed that the entire complex had been rigged with demolition charges. Perdurabo's final insult was to deny the Imperial Fists even the satisfaction of capturing his fortress, as the Iron Warriors withdrew through hidden tunnels while their stronghold collapsed around the attacking forces. The casualties from the Iron Cage incident were catastrophic even by the standards of Space Marine warfare. Nearly 400 Imperial Fists died in the assault, while hundreds more suffered wounds that would require extensive augmetic replacement or force their retirement from active duty. The chapter's command structure was decimated, with veteran sergeants and company captains among the dead. The loss of so much institutional knowledge and tactical expertise would take decades to replace, assuming that suitable recruits could be found and properly trained. The psychological impact of the Iron Cage proved even more devastating than the physical casualties. The Imperial Fists had entered the operation seeking redemption for their perceived failures during the siege of Terra, but instead they had walked into a carefully prepared trap that had cost them dearly while achieving nothing of strategic value. The survivors returned to Terra bearing fresh wounds to add to their existing trauma, their confidence in their own abilities shattered by the experience of systematic defeat at the hands of their traditional rivals. Dorn's response to the Iron Cage disaster marked the beginning of a fundamental transformation in the Imperial Fists' culture and practices. The Primarch's guilt over the casualties he had led his warriors into was compounded by his recognition that his own psychological wounds had contributed to the tactical failures that had made the disaster possible. His decision to seek redemption through pain reflected both his personal need for absolution and his understanding that the chapter required new methods for dealing with failure and trauma. The introduction of the Pain Glove represented Dorn's attempt to institutionalize the process of confronting and overcoming psychological weakness through controlled suffering. The device itself was deceptively simple in appearance, resembling a form-fitting bodysuit constructed from neural interface cables and sensory amplification nodes. When activated, the Pain Glove stimulated the wearer's nervous system to produce sensations of intense physical agony without causing actual tissue damage, creating a controlled environment for testing mental fortitude and spiritual resolve. The philosophical justification for the Pain Glove's use drew from Dorn's analysis of the factors that had contributed to both the siege's traumatic aftermath and the Iron Cage's disastrous outcome. The Primarch concluded that the Imperial Fists' psychological wounds had been allowed to fester because they lacked proper mechanisms for confronting and processing their experiences of failure and loss. The Pain Glove provided a means for warriors to voluntarily subject themselves to suffering that was comparable to their emotional trauma, forcing them to develop coping mechanisms that could be applied to future challenges. The implementation of the Codex Astartes forced Rogal Dorn to confront the systematic dismantling of everything the 7th Legion had built over 2 centuries of warfare. The process began in the immediate aftermath of the Iron Cage, when the surviving Imperial Fists returned to Terra bearing wounds that went far deeper than the physical scars inflicted by Iron Warriors' weapons. The chapter's strength had been reduced to barely 3,000 battle brothers, a catastrophic decline from the tens of thousands who had once served under Dorn's command during the Great Crusade. The survivors carried with them not only the trauma of recent defeats, but also the weight of institutional knowledge that would need to be preserved and transmitted to the successor chapters that Guilliman's reforms demanded. Dorn's acceptance of the Codex's requirements came only after months of internal struggle that tested his loyalty to the Emperor against his conviction that the Imperial Fists' specialized expertise required preservation in its original form. The Primarch's eventual compliance reflected his recognition that continued resistance would serve no constructive purpose while potentially creating another schism within the already fractured Loyalist forces. His decision to divide the Legion proceeded with the same methodical attention to detail that had characterized his approach to siege warfare, though the emotional cost of fragmenting his life's work remained visible in his increasingly haggard appearance and obsessive behavior patterns. The creation of the Black Templars represented Dorn's most significant departure from conventional chapter organization, as he recognized that certain elements within the Imperial Fists required outlets for their zealous dedication that standard garrison duties could not provide. The warriors selected for this successor chapter included many of the Legion's most fervent believers, battle brothers whose faith in the Emperor had been transformed by the siege of Terra into an almost religious devotion that demanded constant expression through righteous warfare. Their leader, Sigismund, embodied this transformation perfectly, his legendary skill with a blade now matched by an uncompromising dedication to purging the galaxy of the Emperor's enemies through eternal crusade. The Black Templars' founding charter deliberately omitted many of the Codex's organizational restrictions, allowing them to maintain the crusading traditions that had characterized the Imperial Fists during the Great Crusade, while adapting these practices to the new political realities of the post-heresy Imperium. Dorn understood that these warriors needed the freedom to pursue their enemies across the galaxy without being constrained by the territorial limitations that bound other chapters to specific sectors or systems. Their fleet-based organization would allow them to respond to threats wherever they emerged, while maintaining the mobility necessary for sustained offensive operations. The gene seed allocated to the Black Templars carried within it the same unwavering dedication to duty that had defined the Imperial Fists, but in these warriors it manifested as an aggressive righteousness that sought to prove their loyalty through constant warfare against the Imperium's enemies. Their recruitment practices would eventually evolve to favor candidates who demonstrated not only physical prowess, but also the spiritual fervor necessary for a lifetime of crusading warfare. The chapter's training regimens emphasized close combat skills and boarding actions, reflecting their intended role as assault specialists who would carry the Emperor's wrath directly to their enemies. The Crimson Fists received a different inheritance from their parent legion, as Dorn selected for them the Imperial Fists' most accomplished siege specialists and defensive warfare experts. Their founding cadre included veterans of the palace's fortification and the subsequent defense against Horus's forces, battle brothers whose expertise in static warfare and fortification construction represented centuries of accumulated knowledge that could not be allowed to disappear. The chapter's assigned homeworld of Rin's world provided an ideal testing ground for these skills. Its strategic location, requiring constant vigilance against orc incursions and pirate raids that would keep their defensive capabilities sharp. The Crimson Fist's organizational structure reflected their specialization in siege warfare, with companies organized around specific defensive functions rather than the flexible arrangements preferred by other Codex-compliant chapters. Their siege companies maintained the specialized equipment and training necessary for prolonged defensive operations, while their scout companies focused on reconnaissance and intelligence gathering in support of fortress construction projects. The chapter's artificers inherited the Imperial Fists' expertise in siege engine construction and defensive system maintenance, ensuring that these critical skills would be preserved for future generations. The gene seed characteristics that the Crimson Fists inherited from the Imperial Fists manifested most clearly in their enhanced spatial reasoning abilities and intuitive understanding of structural engineering principles. These traits, combined with their systematic approach to tactical planning, made them natural fortress builders whose defensive installations would become legendary throughout the Imperium. Their recruitment practices favored candidates from worlds with strong defensive traditions, particularly those whose populations had survived in hostile environments through careful planning and disciplined execution of defensive protocols. The Iron Fists represented Dorn's attempt to preserve the Imperial Fists' most fundamental characteristics in a chapter that would serve as a living repository of the Legion's pre-heresy traditions and tactical doctrines. The warriors selected for this successor chapter included many of the Legion's most experienced sergeants and company officers, veterans whose careers spanned the entire Great Crusade and who possessed intimate knowledge of the tactical innovations that had made the 7th Legion so effective during humanity's expansion across the galaxy. Their mission would be to maintain these traditions while adapting them to the smaller-scale operations that the Codex system demanded. The Iron Fist's homeworld selection process reflected Dorn's understanding that proper recruitment required environments that would produce candidates with the mental and physical characteristics necessary for siege warfare. The chapter eventually established its fortress monastery on a world whose population had survived for millennia in underground cities carved from solid rock, their defensive traditions providing an ideal foundation for Space Marine recruitment. The planet's harsh surface conditions and complex subterranean networks created natural training grounds where new recruits could master the fundamentals of siegecraft under realistic conditions. The Soul Drinkers emerged from the division process as perhaps the most traditional of the Imperial Fist successor chapters, their founding cadre, selected specifically to preserve the Legion's approach to methodical warfare and disciplined execution of complex operations. These warriors carried forward the institutional practices that had defined the Imperial Fists since their earliest days, including their emphasis on detailed planning, systematic preparation, and unwavering adherence to established protocols. Their chapter cult would develop around the concept of perfection through discipline, viewing their gene seed's characteristics as sacred gifts that required constant refinement through proper training and spiritual dedication. The excoriators received perhaps the most challenging inheritance from their parent legion, as Dorn selected for them warriors whose psychological profiles suggested an unusual capacity for enduring suffering and maintaining effectiveness under extreme stress. These battle brothers would carry forward the lessons learned from the Iron Cage and the subsequent introduction of the Pain Glove, developing training regimens that emphasized mental fortitude and the ability to function effectively despite physical and emotional trauma. Their chapter's practices would evolve to include ritual scarification and other forms of controlled suffering designed to strengthen their resolve and prepare them for the galaxy's harshest challenges. The process of dividing the Imperial Fists' gene seed stocks required unprecedented attention to genetic purity and stability, as any contamination or degradation could compromise the successor chapter's long-term viability. The Legion's apothecaries had maintained detailed records of gene seed characteristics throughout the Great Crusade, documenting the subtle variations that had emerged among different recruitment populations, while tracking the overall stability of the 7th Legion's genetic inheritance. This data proved invaluable during the division process, allowing the medical specialists to ensure that each successor chapter received gene seed samples that would maintain their distinctive characteristics while avoiding known genetic weaknesses. The allocation of equipment and resources among the successor chapters created complex logistical challenges that required months of careful planning to resolve properly. The Imperial Fists' arsenal included specialized siege equipment that had been developed over centuries of warfare, much of it custom-built by the Legion's artificers to meet specific tactical requirements. The distribution of these resources had to balance each chapter's operational needs against the practical limitations of manufacturing replacement equipment, as many of the specialized tools required knowledge and materials that were no longer readily available in the post-Heresy Imperium. The fortress monasteries established by each successor chapter reflected their individual specializations while maintaining architectural elements that honored their shared heritage from the Imperial Fists. The Black Templars' fleet-based organization required mobile fortress ships rather than planetary installations, their vessels designed to serve as both tactical command centers and spiritual sanctuaries during extended crusades. The Crimson Fist's fortress on Rin's world incorporated defensive innovations developed during the palace's fortification, creating a stronghold that could serve as both a training facility and a practical demonstration of proper siege warfare principles. The development of distinct chapter cultures among the Imperial Fist's successors proceeded gradually as each organization adapted to its assigned role and operational environment. The Black Templars' crusading traditions fostered a warrior culture that emphasized personal honor and martial prowess, with individual battle brothers earning recognition through their performance in combat against the Emperor's enemies. The Crimson Fists developed a more scholarly approach that valued technical expertise and strategic thinking, their warriors studying the great sieges of history to extract lessons that could be applied to contemporary challenges. The training regimens established by each successor chapter reflected their specialized roles while maintaining the fundamental principles that had defined Imperial Fists doctrine since the Legion's founding. The Black Templars emphasized close combat training and boarding actions, their warriors practicing with the chainswords and bolt pistols that would serve them during ship-to-ship assaults and urban warfare. The Crimson Fists focused on siegecraft and defensive warfare, their recruits learning to operate the specialized equipment necessary for fortress construction and siege engine maintenance. The relationship between Rogal Dorn and his successor chapters evolved differently for each organization, reflecting both their individual characteristics and the Primarch's own psychological state during the post-Heresy period. His connection with the Black Templars remained strong throughout their early years, as their crusading fervor provided an outlet for his own need to serve the Emperor through constant warfare against the Imperium's enemies. The Primarch's guidance helped shape their tactical doctrine and spiritual practices, ensuring that their zealous dedication would be channeled effectively rather than degenerating into mindless aggression. The Crimson Fists received more direct supervision from Dorn during their founding years, as their specialization in siege warfare required careful preservation of the technical knowledge that the Imperial Fists had accumulated over centuries of campaign experience. The Primarch personally oversaw the establishment of their training programs and equipment allocation, ensuring that critical skills would not be lost during the transition from Legion to chapter organization. His involvement in their early operations provided valuable guidance while allowing him to evaluate the effectiveness of the Codex system in preserving specialized military capabilities. The ongoing coordination between the Imperial Fists and their successor chapters created informal networks that supplemented the official command structures established by the Codex Astartes. These relationships allowed for the sharing of intelligence, tactical innovations, and strategic resources while maintaining the independence that the reforms were designed to ensure. The successor chapters' diverse operational environments provided valuable testing grounds for new equipment and tactical approaches, while their specialized capabilities could be called upon when the Imperial Fists encountered challenges that required particular expertise. The gene seed monitoring programs established during the Second Founding created systematic oversight of genetic stability across all the Imperial Fist successor chapters, ensuring that any mutations or degradation would be detected and addressed before they could compromise operational effectiveness. The Adeptus Mechanicus maintained detailed records of each chapter's genetic characteristics while providing technical support for gene seed cultivation and implantation procedures. This oversight proved particularly important for the Imperial Fists lineage, as their gene seed stability made them valuable sources of genetic material for future founding events. The tactical doctrines developed by each successor chapter reflected their individual operational requirements while maintaining core principles inherited from the Imperial Fists. The Black Templars' crusading operations required flexible assault tactics that could be adapted to diverse enemy types and battlefield conditions, leading them to develop specialized techniques for shipboarding, urban warfare, and rapid deployment operations. The Crimson Fists' focus on defensive warfare led to innovations in fortress design and siege engine construction, their engineers developing new approaches to fortification that incorporated lessons learned from the Heresy's devastating conflicts. The recruitment territories assigned to each successor chapter were selected to provide sustainable sources of candidates while avoiding conflicts with other Space Marine organizations. The Black Templars' fleet-based operations allowed them to recruit from multiple worlds during their crusades, selecting candidates who demonstrated the physical and spiritual qualities necessary for their demanding lifestyle. The Crimson Fist's control of Rin's world provided them with a stable recruitment base whose population had been shaped by generations of defensive warfare against Orc incursions. The command structures developed by the successor chapters reflected both Codex requirements and their individual operational needs, creating organizational frameworks that could function effectively while maintaining the disciplined approach that characterized all Imperial Fists descendants. The Black Templars' crusading companies operated with considerable autonomy under the guidance of marshal rank officers, while maintaining coordination through regular gatherings and shared communication networks. The Crimson Fists adopted a more centralized command structure that emphasized coordination between specialized companies and careful resource allocation to support their siege warfare operations. The massive star fortress known as the Phalanx drifts through the void between Terra and Mars, its ancient hull scarred by millennia of warfare, yet still radiating the implacable strength that has made it synonymous with the Imperial Fists themselves. This colossal vessel serves not merely as the chapter's mobile monastery, but as a living symbol of their enduring dedication to the Emperor's vision, its vast corridors echoing with the prayers of battle brothers and the rhythmic hammering of artificers maintaining weapons that have defended humanity since the dark days of the Horus Heresy. The fortress ship's silhouette against the stars presents a sight that has inspired countless Imperial Navy crews and intimidated enemies across the galaxy. Its distinctive architecture, blending the practical requirements of a warship with the sacred symbolism of a space marine monastery. The phalanx's origins stretch back to the earliest days of human expansion into the void, though the exact circumstances of its construction remain shrouded in the mysteries of the dark age of technology. Archaeological evidence suggests that the massive vessel began as a deep space monitoring station designed to track stellar phenomena and coordinate long-range exploration missions, its original builders incorporating construction techniques and materials that modern Imperial technology struggles to replicate. The fortress's core structure consists of adamantium alloys whose molecular composition defies analysis by even the most skilled tech priests, while its primary support beams incorporate crystalline matrices that channel energy with an efficiency that borders on the supernatural. During the Great Crusade's early years, the phalanx served as Rogal Dorn's mobile command center, its vast strategic planning chambers allowing the Primarch to coordinate siege operations across multiple star systems while maintaining direct oversight of his legion's scattered companies. The fortress's communication arrays possessed the range and clarity necessary to maintain contact with Imperial Fists forces operating at the galaxy's edge, while its extensive archives preserved tactical data from every siege operation the Legion conducted. These capabilities made the phalanx invaluable during the methodical campaigns that characterized the 7th Legion's approach to compliance actions, as Dorn could analyze intelligence from multiple theaters simultaneously while directing resources to where they would prove most effective. The fortress's transformation into a true monastery began during the aftermath of the Horus Heresy, when the surviving Imperial Fists required a sanctuary where they could heal both physical wounds and psychological trauma while rebuilding their shattered organization. The phalanx's isolation from planetary populations provided the privacy necessary for the chapter's recovery, while its self-sufficient systems allowed them to operate independently of Imperial supply networks that had been disrupted by the Civil War's devastation. The fortress became a refuge where battle brothers could confront their failures through meditation and penance, while gradually rebuilding the tactical expertise that had been lost during the siege of Terra and the Iron Cage disaster. The phalanx's physical dimensions exceed those of most Imperial Navy vessels by several orders of magnitude, its hull stretching across dozens of kilometers, while its superstructure rises to heights that rival planetary mountain ranges. The fortress's exterior bristles with weapon batteries, whose firepower could devastate entire fleets, while its armor plating incorporates void shield generators capable of deflecting the concentrated fire of multiple battle barges. Docking bays scattered across the hull can accommodate strike cruisers and escort vessels, allowing the phalanx to serve as a mobile fleet base that can support extended operations far from Imperial supply lines. The fortress's internal layout reflects both its original function as a monitoring station and its evolution into a space marine monastery, creating a complex environment where ancient technology coexists with sacred spaces dedicated to the Emperor's worship. The central spine contains the primary command centers and communication arrays, their control systems incorporating cogitator banks whose processing power exceeds that of most planetary governments. Surrounding these critical areas are the residential quarters, training facilities, and workshop spaces that support the chapter's daily operations, their design emphasizing functionality over comfort while maintaining the austere aesthetic that characterizes Imperial Fists architecture. The chapter's recruitment processes aboard the phalanx begin in the fortress's lower levels, where potential aspirants undergo the initial screening procedures that will determine their suitability for transformation into Space Marines. The recruitment chambers incorporate medical facilities, equipped with the most advanced diagnostic equipment available to the Imperium, allowing the chapter's apothecaries to conduct detailed genetic analysis while monitoring candidates' responses to the preliminary enhancement procedures. The fortress's isolation ensures that these sensitive operations remain secure from external observation, while providing the controlled environment necessary for successful gene seed implantation. The Phalanx's training facilities occupy vast sections of the fortress's middle decks, their design incorporating lessons learned from siege operations across the galaxy, while adapting these experiences to the confined environment of a starship. Mock-up defensive positions allow recruits to practice assault techniques against realistic fortifications, while specialized chambers simulate the environmental conditions they might encounter on different types of worlds. The training areas include full-scale reproductions of famous siege sites, allowing new battle brothers to study historical engagements while developing the tactical instincts necessary for their future operations. The fortress's arsenal chambers contain weapons and equipment accumulated over millennia of warfare, their contents representing one of the most comprehensive collections of siege warfare materiel in the Imperium. Ancient plasma cannons, whose designs date to the Great Crusade, stand alongside recently manufactured bolt weapons, while specialized siege equipment, developed by the chapter's artificers, awaits deployment to future battlefields. The Arsenal's organization reflects the Imperial Fists' methodical approach to warfare, with each weapon system cataloged and maintained according to strict protocols that ensure immediate availability when operational requirements demand their use. The sacred chambers within the Phalanx serve as focal points for the chapter's spiritual life, their design incorporating architectural elements that honor both the Emperor's divinity and the Imperial Fists' martial heritage. The primary chapel occupies a position at the fortress's heart, its soaring vaulted ceiling decorated with murals depicting the chapter's greatest victories, while its altar incorporates relics from the Siege of Terra. The chamber's acoustics have been carefully designed to amplify the battle brothers' voices during their devotional chants, creating harmonics that resonate throughout the surrounding sections and remind all aboard of their sacred duties. The chapter's command structure aboard the Phalanx reflects the fortress's dual role as both warship and monastery, with authority divided between military officers responsible for tactical operations and chaplains who oversee spiritual matters. The chapter master maintains his personal quarters near the primary command center, their austere furnishings reflecting the Imperial Fists' rejection of unnecessary luxury, while incorporating strategic planning equipment that allows him to coordinate operations across multiple star systems. The fortress's senior officers occupy adjacent quarters, their proximity facilitating the constant communication necessary for effective command during extended campaigns. The Phalanx's relationship with Terra extends far beyond simple loyalty to the Emperor's throne world, as the fortress serves as a mobile extension of the Imperial Palace's defensive network, while maintaining the flexibility necessary for independent operations. Regular patrols through the Sol system allow the chapter to monitor potential threats while demonstrating their continued commitment to Terra's protection, their presence serving as a deterrent to enemies who might otherwise consider attacking humanity's birthworld. The fortress's communication systems maintain constant contact with the palace's command centers, ensuring that the Imperial Fists can respond immediately to any threat that might emerge within the system. The defensive responsibilities that the Phalanx shoulders include not only the protection of Terra itself, but also the security of the vital shipping lanes that connect the Sol system to the wider Imperium. The fortress's patrol routes are carefully planned to provide maximum coverage of these critical space lanes, while maintaining the unpredictability necessary to prevent enemies from anticipating their movements. Imperial Navy convoys traveling through the system often coordinate their schedules with the Phalanx's patrol patterns, taking advantage of the additional security that the fortress's presence provides, while benefiting from the early warning systems that its advanced sensors can provide. The fortress's role in defending the throne world has been tested repeatedly throughout the millennia since the Horus Heresy, as various enemies have attempted to strike at the heart of the Imperium through direct assault on the Sol system. During the War of the Beast, the phalanx served as a rallying point for Imperial forces attempting to coordinate their response to the massive Orc invasion, its communication arrays allowing scattered fleet elements to maintain contact, while its weapon systems provided fire support for the desperate defense of Terra's orbital installations. The fortress's performance during this crisis demonstrated its continued relevance as a strategic asset, while validating the Imperial Fists' decision to maintain it as their primary base of operations. The phalanx's advanced sensor systems provide the Imperial Fists with intelligence capabilities that extend far beyond normal Space Marine operations, allowing them to monitor warp space fluctuations and detect potential threats before they can materialize within the Sol system. These sensors incorporate technology whose origins date to the Dark Age of technology, their sensitivity allowing them to detect minute gravitational anomalies that might indicate approaching fleets or unusual stellar phenomena that could affect navigation through the system. The data collected by these systems is shared with other Imperial organizations, contributing to the overall security of humanity's most important star system, while advancing scientific understanding of warp space mechanics. The fortress's manufacturing capabilities allow the Imperial Fists to maintain their equipment and produce specialized weapons without relying on external supply chains that might be disrupted during extended campaigns. The production facilities incorporate forged temples where the chapter's artificers work alongside tech priests to create weapons and armor that meet the specific requirements of siege warfare. Their output including everything from standard bolt weapons to the massive siege engines that the chapter deploys during major operations. These manufacturing capabilities ensure that the Imperial Fists can maintain their operational effectiveness even when operating far from Imperial supply bases or during extended campaigns where resupply might be impossible. The phalanx's medical facilities represent some of the most advanced surgical and genetic manipulation technology available to the Space Marines, their capabilities extending far beyond simple trauma treatment to include the complex procedures necessary for gene seed implantation and augmetic integration. The fortress's apothecaries maintain detailed genetic records for every battle brother, while monitoring the chapter's gene seed stocks for signs of mutation or degradation. These medical facilities have played crucial roles in preserving the Imperial Fist's genetic heritage, while advancing the Imperium's understanding of Space Marine physiology and the long-term effects of genetic enhancement. The fortress's archives contain one of the most comprehensive collections of siege warfare knowledge in the galaxy, their databanks preserving tactical analyses, engineering specifications, and historical records that span millennia of military operations. These archives serve not only as reference materials for current operations, but also as training resources for new battle brothers who must master the complex principles of siegecraft before they can be considered fully qualified Imperial Fists. The knowledge preserved within these archives represents the accumulated wisdom of countless campaigns, its value extending far beyond simple historical interest to provide practical guidance for contemporary challenges. The phalanx's role as a training ground for the chapter's recruits extends beyond simple military instruction to include the spiritual education necessary for proper service as Space Marines. The fortress's chaplains conduct regular instruction sessions where aspirants learn not only the tactical principles that will guide their future operations, but also the philosophical foundations that underpin the Imperial Fists' approach to warfare. These educational programs emphasize the importance of duty, discipline, and sacrifice, while instilling the unwavering loyalty to the Emperor that has characterized the chapter since its founding. The fortress's relationship with the Adeptus Mechanicus reflects the complex interdependence between the Space Marines and the Tech Priests who maintain much of the Imperium's advanced technology. The Phalanx hosts a permanent contingent of Tech Priests whose expertise is essential for maintaining the fortress's ancient systems, while providing technical support for the chapter's specialized equipment. These relationships have evolved over millennia of cooperation, creating working partnerships that benefit both organizations while advancing their shared commitment to preserving humanity's technological heritage. The Phalanx's strategic mobility allows the Imperial Fists to respond rapidly to threats throughout the galaxy while maintaining their primary responsibility for Terra's defense. The fortress's warp drives incorporate safety systems and navigation equipment that allow it to travel safely through even the most turbulent regions of warp space, while its massive size provides the structural integrity necessary to survive the stresses of extended warp travel. This mobility has proven crucial during major campaigns, where the chapter's expertise in siege warfare has been required far from the Sol system, allowing them to deploy their full capabilities while maintaining the ability to return quickly if Terra comes under threat. The genetic legacy of Rogal Dorn flows through the veins of every Imperial Fist, carrying with it both the strengths that have made the chapter legendary and the peculiar deficiencies that mark them as distinct among the Adeptus Astartes. The gene seed of the 7th Legion exhibits remarkable stability compared to many of their brother chapters, with mutation rates consistently below Imperial averages and a genetic structure that has remained largely unchanged since the Great Crusade. However, this stability comes with notable absences that have shaped both the chapter's capabilities and their approach to warfare in ways that extend far beyond simple physiological limitations. The missing Becher's gland represents perhaps the most significant genetic deficiency within the Imperial Fist's gene seed, depriving them of the ability to produce the corrosive saliva that other Space Marines can use to break down metallic substances or deliver toxins to enemies during close combat. This absence eliminates a tool that many chapters take for granted, forcing Imperial Fists to rely entirely on conventional weapons and equipment when facing armored opponents or attempting to breach secured positions. The practical implications of this deficiency manifest most clearly during boarding actions and urban warfare, where the ability to dissolve locks, corrode armor joints, or neutralize electronic systems through biochemical means could provide significant tactical advantages. The absence of the Susan membrane creates additional challenges for Imperial Fists operating in extreme environments or facing situations where extended periods of unconsciousness might be tactically advantageous. Other Space Marines can enter voluntary suspended animation to survive in hostile conditions such as hard vacuum or toxic atmospheres, conserving oxygen and reducing metabolic requirements during extended operations. Imperial Fists must instead rely on their power armor's life support systems and external equipment to survive in environments that their gene brothers could endure through biological adaptation alone. This limitation requires more careful logistical planning during void operations and forces the chapter to maintain higher equipment standards to compensate for their reduced biological resilience. Despite these deficiencies, the Imperial Fist gene seed produces enhancements that are particularly well suited to their role as siege specialists and defenders. The osmedulla organ shows enhanced development in Imperial Fist's recruits, producing bone density and structural integrity that exceeds even the impressive standards typical of Space Marine physiology. This enhanced skeletal system provides superior protection against impact trauma and allows Imperial Fists to withstand the tremendous forces generated by heavy weapons and explosive devices commonly encountered during siege operations. Battle Brothers can survive direct hits from weapons that would cripple other warriors, while their enhanced bone structure provides a more stable platform for the heavy equipment frequently used in siege warfare. The hemastamen organ demonstrates particularly robust development in Imperial Fists, producing blood chemistry modifications that enhance their ability to process toxins and resist the effects of chemical weapons. This adaptation proves invaluable during siege operations, where defenders might employ gas attacks or contaminate water supplies with biological agents. Imperial Fists can operate effectively in environments poisoned by industrial chemicals or battlefield contaminants that would force other Space Marines to rely heavily on their armor's filtration systems. The enhanced blood chemistry also improves their recovery from wounds and reduces the likelihood of infection during extended campaigns where medical facilities might be limited. The neurological enhancements produced by the Imperial Fists gene seed manifest in subtle but significant improvements to spatial reasoning and structural analysis capabilities. Battle Brothers develop an almost supernatural ability to assess load-bearing capacities, identify structural weak points, and calculate blast patterns with remarkable accuracy. These cognitive enhancements complement their role as siege specialists, allowing them to make rapid tactical decisions based on environmental factors that other warriors might overlook. Veterans can examine a fortification and immediately identify the most efficient approach for breaching its defenses, while their enhanced spatial awareness helps them navigate complex urban environments and underground tunnel networks. The recruitment practices of the Imperial Fists reflect their need for candidates whose genetic profiles are compatible with their particular gene seed characteristics, while possessing the mental attributes necessary for siege warfare. The chapter maintains recruitment rights on dozens of worlds throughout the Imperium, with selection criteria that emphasize psychological stability, analytical thinking, and the ability to maintain discipline under extreme stress. Unlike some chapters that recruit primarily from feral or death worlds, the Imperial Fists often select candidates from civilized worlds where technical education and disciplined military service have prepared potential recruits for the complex demands of siegecraft. The fortress world of Necromunda provides a steady stream of recruits whose upbringing in the planet's hive cities has prepared them for the claustrophobic conditions and industrial environments commonly encountered during siege operations. The Underhive's gang warfare teaches survival skills and tactical thinking, while the constant threat of structural collapse develops the spatial awareness that Imperial Fists prize in their battle brothers. Candidates from Necromunda typically demonstrate exceptional ability to navigate complex urban environments and show natural aptitude for the technical skills required to operate siege equipment. The ice world of Vostok contributes recruits who have been shaped by generations of defensive warfare against Xenos raiders and environmental hazards. The planet's population lives in fortress cities carved from glacial ice, their survival dependent on maintaining complex defensive networks and mechanical systems in extreme cold conditions. These candidates bring with them an understanding of defensive thinking and siege mentality that aligns perfectly with Imperial Fists doctrine, while their experience with harsh environmental conditions prepares them for the physical demands of Space Marine transformation. The selection process for potential recruits involves extensive psychological evaluation designed to identify candidates who possess the mental fortitude necessary for siege warfare, while screening out those whose personalities might be incompatible with the chapter's disciplined approach to combat. The Imperial Fists seek individuals who can maintain effectiveness during prolonged static operations, resist the psychological pressure of being under constant attack, and make rational decisions when faced with overwhelming odds. The evaluation process includes simulated siege scenarios where candidates must demonstrate their ability to think clearly under stress while following complex tactical instructions. Physical testing focuses on endurance and pain tolerance rather than pure strength or speed, reflecting the chapter's understanding that siege warfare demands the ability to function effectively despite fatigue, injury, and psychological stress. Candidates undergo extended trials that simulate the conditions they might face during actual siege operations, including periods of sleep deprivation, exposure to loud noises and bright lights, and physical challenges that test their ability to maintain coordination and judgment while experiencing significant discomfort. Those who demonstrate exceptional resilience during these trials are considered prime candidates for gene seed implantation. The gene seed implantation process for Imperial Fists recruits follow standard Astartes protocols, but includes additional monitoring for the specific characteristics that mark successful integration of Dorn's genetic legacy. The missing organs require no surgical implantation, but their absence must be compensated for through enhanced training with equipment and techniques that provide similar capabilities. Recruits learn to use specialized tools and chemicals to accomplish tasks that other Space Marines might handle through biological means, developing technical skills that complement their enhanced physical capabilities. The chapter's current organization reflects both Codex Astartes requirements and the specific needs of siege warfare specialists operating in the post-Heresy Imperium. The Imperial Fists maintain 10 companies as mandated by Guilliman's reforms, but their internal structure emphasizes specialization and technical expertise over the flexible arrangements preferred by many Codex-compliant chapters. Each company contains specialists trained in particular aspects of siegecraft, creating a depth of expertise that allows the chapter to tackle complex fortification challenges while maintaining the tactical flexibility necessary for diverse operational environments. The first company consists entirely of Terminator armored veterans whose experience spans decades of siege operations across the galaxy. These warriors serve as assault specialists during the most dangerous phases of siege warfare, their tactical dreadnought armor providing the protection necessary to advance through concentrated defensive fire, while their weapons deliver the firepower needed to eliminate hardened positions. The company's organization emphasizes small unit tactics and independent operation, allowing veteran squads to identify and exploit tactical opportunities without requiring constant direction from higher command levels. The 2nd through 5th companies serve as battle companies equipped for general siege operations, their composition including tactical squads trained in assault techniques, devastator squads specializing in heavy weapons support, and assault squads capable of rapid movement through complex terrain. Each company maintains specialists in particular siege techniques, including breacher specialists trained to penetrate fortified positions, engineers capable of constructing and operating siege equipment, and communications specialists who can maintain coordination during extended operations. The companies can operate independently during smaller engagements or combine their capabilities for major siege operations requiring concentrated force. The 6th and 7th companies function as tactical reserve formations, whose primary role involves providing reinforcement for engaged units, while maintaining the flexibility to respond to unexpected developments during siege operations. These companies emphasize rapid deployment and tactical adaptability, their training focusing on the ability to assess ongoing situations quickly and integrate seamlessly with existing operations. Reserve Company Battle Brothers often serve as specialists in particular siege techniques, allowing them to provide expert support when specific challenges arise during complex operations. The 8th Company serves as the chapter's assault specialists, their training emphasizing close combat techniques and rapid movement through hostile environments. These warriors specialize in the final phases of siege operations, when defensive positions must be cleared through direct assault, their equipment including jump packs, specialized close combat weapons, and boarding shields designed for operations in confined spaces. The company's organization allows for flexible deployment in small units capable of independent operation or massed formations that can overwhelm enemy positions through concentrated assault. The 9th Company functions as the chapter's devastator specialists, their heavy weapons providing the firepower necessary to breach fortified positions and suppress enemy defensive systems. Company Battle Brothers train extensively with all types of heavy weapons, developing expertise in target selection, ammunition conservation, and coordination with assault elements. The company maintains specialized equipment including siege cannons, demolition charges, and void shield generators that can be deployed to support major siege operations. The 10th Company serves the traditional scout role while emphasizing reconnaissance and intelligence gathering in support of siege operations. Scout Marines learn to conduct detailed surveys of enemy fortifications, identify weak points and approach routes, and establish observation posts that can provide targeting information for heavy weapons. The company's training includes specialized techniques for operating in urban environments and underground tunnel networks, skills that prove essential during the preliminary phases of siege operations. The chapter's command hierarchy reflects their emphasis on technical expertise and methodical planning, with senior officers selected based on their mastery of siege warfare principles, rather than pure combat prowess or political connections. Company captains must demonstrate comprehensive understanding of fortification design, siege engine operation, and the complex logistics required to sustain prolonged siege operations. The selection process includes extensive evaluation of tactical decision-making under stress, with candidates required to plan and execute simulated siege operations while adapting to changing conditions and resource limitations. The Imperial Fists maintain specialized roles within their organization that reflect their unique mission requirements and technical expertise. Master of the Arsenal oversees the chapter's extensive collection of siege equipment, ensuring that weapons and tools remain properly maintained while coordinating their deployment to support ongoing operations. This position requires detailed knowledge of siege engine construction and operation, as well as the logistical expertise necessary to coordinate equipment movement and maintenance across multiple theaters of operation. The Master of the Watch serves as the chapter's primary intelligence coordinator, responsible for gathering and analyzing information about potential siege targets while maintaining awareness of threats that might require the chapter's intervention. This role involves coordination with other Imperial organizations, including the Imperial Navy, Astra Militarum, and various intelligence agencies, to ensure that the Imperial Fists can respond effectively to emerging situations. The position requires expertise in threat assessment and strategic planning, as well as the diplomatic skills necessary to coordinate with external organizations. The chapter's unique traditions reflect their heritage as siege specialists while honoring their connection to Rogal Dorn and the Emperor's vision for humanity. The Feast of Malediction commemorates the Iron Cage incident, serving as an annual reminder of the dangers of pride and the importance of careful tactical planning. During this observance, battle brothers engage in ritual combat using training weapons while reciting the names of those who died during the disastrous operation. The ceremony emphasizes the lessons learned from failure, while honoring the sacrifice of those who gave their lives in service to the chapter. The Vigil of Defiance honors the siege of Terra and the Imperial Fists' role in defending the Emperor's palace against Horus's assault. Battle brothers maintain continuous prayer vigils throughout the observance period, their devotions focusing on the themes of duty, sacrifice, and unwavering loyalty to the Emperor. The tradition includes readings from tactical reports and personal accounts of the siege, ensuring that each generation of Imperial Fists understands the historical significance of their chapter's greatest trial. The chapter's heraldry carries deep symbolic meaning that reflects both their martial heritage and their spiritual dedication to the Emperor's service. The primary colors of yellow and black represent the contrast between the light of the Emperor's truth and the darkness of humanity's enemies, while also providing practical advantages during siege operations by making Imperial Fists easily identifiable to Allied forces operating in complex urban environments. The fist symbol serves as both a representation of their Primarch's name and a symbol of their role as the Emperor's iron will made manifest in the material universe. Company markings follow Codex standards while incorporating additional symbols that indicate specialized roles and particular expertise areas. Siege specialists display crossed hammers on their shoulder guards, while veterans of major siege operations earn the right to display fortress symbols that commemorate their participation in significant campaigns. These markings serve both ceremonial purposes and practical identification needs, allowing commanders to quickly assess the capabilities of available forces while maintaining the chapter's connection to their historical achievements. The War of the Beast erupted across the galaxy in the 32nd millennium as the largest orc invasion in recorded Imperial history, its scope dwarfing even the massive Wa that had threatened Terra during the Great Crusade. The massive greenskin armada that emerged from the galactic core brought with it technologies and organizational capabilities that defied everything the Imperium understood about orc warfare. Their attack moons and gargantuan space hulks representing a level of coordination and engineering sophistication that challenged fundamental assumptions about Xeno's capabilities. When the first reports reached Terra of entire star systems falling silent before walls of green-skinned invaders, the High Lords of Terra faced the terrifying possibility that humanity might be witnessing the emergence of a new orc empire capable of matching the Imperium's military might. The Imperial Fists' response to the crisis demonstrated their continued effectiveness as siege specialists while testing their organizational resilience against an enemy whose approach to warfare seemed to violate every principle of rational military doctrine. Chapter Master Daylight Wall led the initial Imperial Fists' response, deploying 3 full companies to reinforce the Cadian Gate when early intelligence suggested that the orc advance might threaten the approaches to Terra itself. The Imperial Fists found themselves facing enemies who had somehow learned to construct fortress cities that rivaled Imperial defensive installations in their complexity and durability, their crude but effective engineering creating strongholds that could withstand sustained bombardment while supporting massive populations of warrior caste orcs. The Siege of Ulanor Prime became the Imperial Fists' defining engagement during the war, as the planet that had once witnessed the Emperor's greatest triumph against the Greenskins now hosted an orc civilization that had evolved far beyond anything previously encountered. The planetary surface had been transformed into a single massive fortress city, whose sprawling defensive networks incorporated both scavenged Imperial technology and innovative orc engineering solutions that defied conventional analysis. The fortress city's outer perimeter stretched across entire continents, its ramparts bristling with weapon batteries whose firepower could challenge Imperial Navy vessels, while its underground tunnel networks allowed defenders to move reinforcements and supplies without exposure to orbital bombardment. Captain Darnath Lysander emerged as one of the Imperial Fists' most capable leaders during the Ulanor campaign, his tactical brilliance and personal courage inspiring battle brothers who had begun to question whether conventional siege techniques could overcome enemies who seemed to rebuild their defenses faster than Imperial forces could destroy them. Lysander's analysis of the orc fortifications revealed that their apparent chaos concealed a sophisticated understanding of defensive principles, with redundant systems and overlapping fields of fire that created defensive networks capable of functioning even when individual sections were overrun or destroyed. His recognition that the orcs had learned to think strategically rather than simply relying on brute force fundamentally altered Imperial tactical approaches to the campaign. The breakthrough at Ulanor came when Lysander identified a critical weakness in the orc fortress city's power distribution network, recognizing that the Greenskins' enthusiasm for massive energy weapons had created vulnerabilities that could be exploited through precisely coordinated assault operations. The Imperial Fists' attack required simultaneous strikes against 17 separate power generation facilities, their timing coordinated to within seconds to prevent the orcs from rerouting power through backup systems. The operation demanded the kind of methodical planning and precise execution that had characterized the chapter since Rogal Dorn's time, while adapting these traditional approaches to counter an enemy whose capabilities had evolved far beyond previous encounters. The assault teams that penetrated the orc fortress city found themselves fighting through industrial complexes whose scale and complexity rivaled Imperial Forge worlds, their production facilities churning out weapons and equipment with an efficiency that challenged assumptions about orc technological capabilities. The Greenskins had somehow learned to mass-produce siege engines and defensive systems using standardized components and assembly line techniques, their manufacturing processes creating equipment that maintained consistent quality standards despite being produced by creatures whose individual efforts typically resulted in crude but functional devices. The discovery of these production capabilities forced Imperial strategists to reconsider their understanding of Orc society and the potential threat that organized greenskin civilizations might pose to human expansion. Lysander's personal combat during the Ulanor siege became legendary among Imperial Fists' battle brothers, his performance in single combat against Orc warbosses demonstrating the effectiveness of disciplined training against even the most physically imposing enemies. The future chapter master's fighting style emphasized precision and tactical awareness over pure aggression. His ability to identify and exploit weaknesses in enemy fighting techniques, allowing him to defeat opponents whose size and strength should have provided overwhelming advantages. His victories against multiple Orc champions during the fortress city's final assault provided crucial morale boosts for Imperial forces, while demonstrating that even the most advanced Orc warriors could be defeated through proper application of Space Marine training and equipment. The War of the Beasts' conclusion left the Imperial Fists with valuable lessons about adapting their siege warfare expertise to counter enemies whose capabilities had evolved beyond traditional parameters. The campaign demonstrated that their methodical approach to tactical planning remained effective against sophisticated opponents, but it also highlighted the need for greater flexibility in equipment and techniques when facing enemies who could learn and adapt their own strategies. The chapter's experiences during the war influenced their subsequent training programs and equipment development, leading to innovations in siege techniques that would prove valuable during later campaigns against equally challenging opponents. The Third War for Armageddon tested the Imperial Fists' ability to coordinate their specialized capabilities with other Imperial forces during a massive planetary defense operation that required unprecedented cooperation between multiple Space Marine chapters, Imperial Guard regiments, and Titan legions. The conflict began when Gazkul Mag Uruk Thraka returned to the Hive world that had previously witnessed his defeats, bringing with him a Wa whose size and organization reflected lessons learned from his earlier encounters with Imperial forces. The Orc warlord's strategic approach to the invasion demonstrated a level of tactical sophistication that forced Imperial commanders to abandon conventional defensive doctrines in favor of more flexible responses to rapidly changing battlefield conditions. The Imperial Fists' deployment to Armageddon focused on the defense of Hive Tartarus, whose strategic location made it crucial to maintaining Imperial control over the planet's northern hemisphere. The Hive City's defensive systems had been extensively upgraded following the previous Orc invasions, but Gazkul's forces brought with them siege equipment and assault techniques that challenged even these improved fortifications. The Imperial Fists found themselves defending positions that had been designed according to their own recommendations, creating the unusual situation of testing their defensive theories against enemies who had learned to counter traditional Imperial siege warfare through practical experience. Captain Lysander's tactical innovations during the Armageddon campaign demonstrated his growing mastery of adaptive siege warfare, as he developed new techniques for coordinating defensive operations with mobile strike forces that could exploit opportunities created by successful defensive actions. His approach emphasized the use of fortified positions as bases for offensive operations rather than simply static defensive barriers, allowing Imperial forces to maintain tactical initiative even when facing numerically superior enemies. The integration of Imperial Fists' defensive expertise with the offensive capabilities of other Space Marine chapters created tactical synergies that proved highly effective against Orc assault tactics. The siege of Hive Tartarus lasted for 6 months, during which the Imperial Fists demonstrated their ability to maintain defensive effectiveness despite constant pressure from enemies who showed no concern for casualties and possessed seemingly unlimited reserves of equipment and personnel. The Hive's defensive systems channeled attacking Orc forces into predetermined kill zones where Imperial heavy weapons could achieve maximum effectiveness, while underground tunnel networks allowed defenders to move reinforcements and supplies without exposure to enemy fire. The Imperial Fists' maintenance of these defensive systems under combat conditions showcased their technical expertise while validating their emphasis on methodical preparation and systematic execution of defensive protocols. The Badab War presented the Imperial Fists with the painful necessity of conducting siege operations against fellow Space Marines who had declared independence from Imperial authority, forcing them to adapt their traditional siege techniques for use against opponents who possessed intimate knowledge of Astartes' capabilities and tactics. The conflict began when the Astral Claws chapter and their allies established the Maelstrom Warders, claiming autonomous authority over the Maelstrom Zone and refusing to acknowledge the High Lords of Terra's jurisdiction over their operations. The Imperial Fists' involvement in the Loyalist response required them to overcome fortifications designed by Space Marine engineers while fighting against warriors whose training and equipment matched their own in quality and effectiveness. The siege of the Astral Claws Fortress Monastery on Badab Primaris became one of the most challenging operations in Imperial Fists' history, as they faced defenders who understood their tactical approaches and had prepared specifically to counter traditional siege warfare techniques. The rebel fortress incorporated design elements that exploited weaknesses in conventional Imperial assault doctrines, while its defenders employed Space Marine equipment and tactics that neutralized many of the advantages that the Imperial Fists typically enjoyed against less sophisticated opponents. The campaign required the development of new assault techniques and the modification of existing equipment to overcome defenses that had been specifically designed to counter their traditional approaches. Lysander's leadership during the Badab War demonstrated his ability to maintain tactical effectiveness and moral authority even when conducting operations against fellow Astartes, whose motivations included legitimate grievances against Imperial administration. His approach to the siege emphasized minimizing casualties on both sides while maintaining the pressure necessary to achieve strategic objectives, recognizing that the conflict's resolution would require the surviving rebels to be reintegrated into Imperial service rather than simply eliminated. The balance between tactical necessity and strategic restraint required constant adjustment as the siege progressed and casualties mounted on both sides. The fortress monastery's eventual fall came through a combination of sustained bombardment and coordinated assault operations that exploited weaknesses created by months of constant pressure on the defenders' supply lines and communication networks. The Imperial Fists' methodical approach to the siege gradually eliminated the rebels' ability to coordinate their defensive efforts while maintaining sufficient pressure to prevent them from reorganizing their positions or receiving reinforcements from allied forces. The final assault required precise timing and coordination between multiple Imperial Fists companies. Their advance through the fortress's defensive perimeter, demonstrating the effectiveness of traditional siege techniques when properly adapted to counter Space Marine defensive capabilities. The campaign's aftermath left the Imperial Fists with valuable experience in conducting siege operations against opponents who possessed comprehensive knowledge of their tactical approaches and organizational methods. The lessons learned during the Badab War influenced subsequent training programs and tactical development, leading to innovations in assault techniques and equipment that would prove valuable during later encounters with renegade Space Marine forces. The conflict also reinforced the importance of maintaining tactical flexibility and adapting established doctrines to counter enemies who could anticipate and prepare for conventional Imperial approaches. Lysander's elevation to Chapter Master reflected both his tactical accomplishments during these major campaigns and his embodiment of the Imperial Fists' core values of duty, discipline, and unwavering loyalty to the Emperor. His leadership style emphasized the systematic analysis of tactical challenges and the methodical application of proven solutions, while maintaining the flexibility necessary to adapt to unexpected developments and enemy innovations. Under his command, the chapter continued to serve as the Emperor's Praetorians, while expanding their operational capabilities to meet the diverse challenges of the 41st millennium's increasingly complex strategic environment. The chapter Masters Innovations in Siege Warfare included the development of new assault techniques that incorporated lessons learned from encounters with technologically advanced enemies and renegade Space Marine forces. These innovations emphasized the integration of traditional Imperial Fists siege expertise with adaptive tactics that could counter enemies who possessed detailed knowledge of Imperial military capabilities. The resulting tactical doctrines maintain the chapter's characteristic emphasis on methodical planning and disciplined execution, while incorporating the flexibility necessary to respond effectively to rapidly changing battlefield conditions. Recent conflicts against Chaos Space Marine forces have tested the Imperial Fists' ability to maintain their tactical effectiveness against enemies whose capabilities have been enhanced by warp-based powers and demonic influences that defy conventional military analysis. The Traitor Legion's use of chaos-corrupted siege equipment and supernatural assault techniques has forced the chapter to develop countermeasures that combine traditional siege warfare principles with specialized techniques for combating warp-based threats. These adaptations have required extensive cooperation with other Imperial organizations, including the Grey Knights and Ordo Malleus, whose expertise in combating chaos forces complements the Imperial Fists' siege warfare capabilities. The defense of Cadia during the 13th Black Crusade demonstrated the Imperial Fists' continued relevance as fortress defenders, while highlighting the challenges of maintaining traditional defensive positions against enemies who could manipulate reality itself through chaos sorcery. The chapter's contribution to the fortress world's defense included the construction of specialized fortifications designed to resist both conventional assault and psychic attack, their design incorporating blessed materials and consecrated architecture that could maintain structural integrity even when subjected to warp-based assaults. The eventual fall of Cadia represented a strategic defeat for the Imperium, but the Imperial Fists' performance during the campaign validated their defensive expertise while providing valuable experience in combating chaos forces equipped with the most advanced siege technologies. Ongoing operations against Orkwa forces across the galaxy have required the Imperial Fists to continuously adapt their siege techniques to counter greenskin innovations in fortress construction and assault tactics. The Orcs' ability to learn from previous encounters with Imperial forces has created an evolutionary pressure that forces constant innovation in Imperial siege warfare, as techniques that prove effective against one Orc force are quickly countered by subsequent enemies who have learned to anticipate and prepare for these approaches. The Imperial Fists' response has emphasized the development of modular siege techniques that can be rapidly adapted to counter specific enemy innovations, while maintaining the systematic approach that has characterized their warfare since the Great Crusade. The emergence of Tyrannid hive fleets has presented the Imperial Fists with entirely new challenges in defensive warfare, as these enemies employ biological siege organisms and adaptive assault techniques that operate according to principles fundamentally different from conventional military doctrine. The Tyrannid's ability to rapidly evolve countermeasures to Imperial defensive techniques has forced the chapter to develop new approaches to fortress design and siege warfare that emphasize unpredictability and constant adaptation, rather than the standardized approaches that have traditionally characterized their operations. These innovations have required extensive experimentation and cooperation with Adeptus Mechanicus researchers who can analyze Tyrannid biological capabilities and develop technological countermeasures. The chapter's current operational status reflects their adaptation to the strategic realities of the 41st millennium while maintaining their core identity as siege warfare specialists and defenders of Terra. Their companies remain deployed across the galaxy in response to various threats, but they maintain the capability to rapidly concentrate their forces for major siege operations or defensive actions that require their specialized expertise. The Phalanx continues to serve as both their mobile fortress monastery and a strategic asset that can provide fire support and logistical coordination for extended campaigns, while their recruitment and training programs ensure a steady supply of battle brothers capable of maintaining their tactical traditions. The chapter's relationship with their successor organizations has evolved to include regular coordination and intelligence sharing that enhances the overall effectiveness of Dorn's genetic legacy across multiple theaters of operation. The Black Templars' crusading operations provide valuable intelligence about enemy capabilities and movements, while the Crimson Fist's defensive expertise contributes to the development of new fortification techniques and siege warfare innovations. This cooperation allows the Imperial Fists to leverage the capabilities of their genetic descendants while maintaining their own focus on the specific challenges of defending Terra and conducting major siege operations. The technological innovations developed by the Imperial Fists during recent campaigns have contributed to the broader Imperial war effort through sharing with other Space Marine chapters and Imperial Guard formations that face similar tactical challenges. Their expertise in siege warfare and defensive construction has proven valuable for establishing secure bases and fortified positions throughout the galaxy, while their experience in combating diverse enemy types provides practical guidance for forces that lack their specialized training and equipment. The chapter's commitment to preserving and transmitting tactical knowledge ensures that their hard-won expertise continues to benefit the Imperium's defensive capabilities across multiple theaters of operation. The emergence of the Great Rift in the closing years of the 41st Millennium tore reality itself asunder, splitting the galaxy in half and plunging countless worlds into perpetual darkness, where the light of the astronomicon could no longer reach. For the Imperial Fists, this cosmic catastrophe represented both their greatest challenge since the Horus Heresy and a validation of their eternal vigilance as Terra's defenders. When the massive warp storm erupted across the galaxy, the Phalanx was conducting patrol operations near the Cadian Gate, placing the chapter's mobile fortress monastery dangerously close to the epicenter of the reality-shattering event that would reshape the Imperium's strategic situation for millennia to come. Chapter Master Tor Garradon's immediate response to the Great Rift's formation demonstrated the tactical flexibility that had become characteristic of Imperial Fists leadership in the modern era. Rather than attempting to return directly to Terra through warp space that had become violently unstable, Garradon ordered the Phalanx to establish a defensive position in the Vigilis system, where Imperial forces were already struggling to maintain control against multiple enemy factions seeking to exploit the chaos caused by the Rift's emergence. The chapter master's decision reflected his understanding that the Imperial Fist's duty extended beyond simple protection of Terra to encompass the broader defense of Imperial civilization wherever it came under threat. The Vigilis campaign tested every aspect of Imperial Fist's doctrine as they found themselves defending a massive hive world against simultaneous assaults by Orkwa forces, Chaos Space Marine warbands, Genestealer cult uprisings, and Eldari raiders who sought to manipulate the conflict for their own mysterious purposes. The planet's strategic importance as a stable warp route through the Great Rift made it a crucial battleground where the Imperium's ability to maintain cohesion across the divided galaxy would be determined. Garradon recognized that failure to hold Vigilis would effectively sever the Imperium Nihilus from Terra's authority, leaving billions of Imperial citizens isolated in a realm where Chaos forces could operate with impunity. The defense of Hive Megaborealis showcased the Imperial Fist's ability to adapt their siege warfare expertise to urban combat environments, where traditional fortification principles had to be modified to account for civilian populations and existing infrastructure. The Hive City's towering spires and dense hab blocks created a three-dimensional battlefield where enemies could approach from multiple directions while using the civilian population as both shields and recruitment sources. Garradon's tactical approach emphasized the creation of fortified zones that could protect key infrastructure, while channeling enemy forces into areas where Imperial firepower could be concentrated most effectively. The arrival of Robute Guilliman's Indomitus crusade brought both reinforcement and fundamental changes to the Imperial Fists' operational methods, as the returned Primarch's strategic vision required adaptation of traditional siege warfare doctrines to accommodate new technologies and tactical approaches. The Primarch's presence in the galaxy, after 10 millennia of absence, created opportunities for direct consultation on matters of grand strategy, but it also highlighted the extent to which warfare had evolved since the Great Crusade. Guilliman's assessment of the Imperial Fists' capabilities confirmed their continued value as siege specialists while identifying areas where their methods could be enhanced through integration with newly developed equipment and tactical innovations. The introduction of Primaris Space Marines into Imperial Fists companies required careful consideration of how these enhanced warriors could be integrated with existing battle brothers while maintaining the chapter's distinctive combat doctrines. The Primaris Marines' superior physical capabilities and advanced equipment offered significant advantages during siege operations, but their different training backgrounds and equipment requirements created challenges for maintaining unit cohesion and tactical coordination. Garradon's approach to integration emphasized gradual incorporation of Primaris squads into existing companies rather than creating separate Primaris formations, allowing veteran battle brothers to share their siege warfare expertise while learning to coordinate with warriors whose capabilities exceeded their own in several key areas. The new Mark 10 power armor worn by Primaris Marines provided enhanced protection and mobility that proved particularly valuable during assault operations against heavily fortified positions. The armor's improved servo motors and reinforced joints allowed warriors to carry heavier equipment while maintaining the agility necessary for rapid movement through complex terrain, while its enhanced life support systems provided greater endurance during extended siege operations. The Imperial Fists artificers worked closely with Adeptus Mechanicus tech priests to modify the armor's specifications for siege warfare, adding specialized equipment mounts and reinforced sections that could better withstand the hazards commonly encountered during fortress assault operations. The Primaris Marines' bolt rifles represented a significant improvement over traditional bolt weapons in terms of range and penetration, capabilities that proved especially valuable during siege operations where defenders might be positioned behind heavy cover or at extreme distances. The weapon's modular design allowed for rapid modification to meet specific tactical requirements, while their improved ammunition types provided enhanced effectiveness against different target types. Imperial Fists veterans found that the bolt rifle's superior accuracy made them ideal for precision targeting of enemy weapon emplacements and command positions during the preliminary phases of siege operations. The integration of new vehicle designs into Imperial Fists' motor pools required extensive modification to accommodate the chapter's specialized operational requirements and tactical preferences. The Primaris Repulsor grav tanks offered enhanced mobility and firepower compared to traditional Rhino transports, but their advanced technology required additional maintenance expertise and logistical support that strained existing supply chains. The Imperial Fists technical specialists worked to develop simplified maintenance procedures and standardized equipment configurations that would allow the new vehicles to operate effectively during extended campaigns without requiring constant technical support from Forge World specialists. Tor Garradon's leadership during the integration period demonstrated his ability to balance respect for traditional Imperial Fists values with recognition of the practical advantages offered by new technologies and tactical approaches. The chapter master's background as a siege warfare specialist allowed him to identify specific areas where Primaris capabilities could enhance existing doctrines without fundamentally altering the methodical approach that had characterized Imperial Fists operations since Rogal Dorn's time. His emphasis on gradual integration and careful evaluation of new equipment ensured that technological advancement would strengthen rather than disrupt the chapter's tactical effectiveness. The chapter master's personal combat record during recent campaigns has validated his selection for leadership, while demonstrating the continued relevance of traditional Imperial Fists training methods in the modern strategic environment. Garrett's approach to personal combat emphasizes precision and tactical awareness over pure aggression, his fighting style reflecting the analytical mindset that characterizes successful siege warfare specialists. His victories against enemy champions during major siege operations have provided crucial morale boosts for Imperial forces, while demonstrating that traditional Space Marine training remains effective against even the most advanced enemy capabilities. The ongoing psychic awakening phenomenon has created additional challenges for the Imperial Fists as they encounter enemies whose capabilities have been enhanced by unprecedented levels of psychic activity throughout the galaxy. The chapter's traditional emphasis on methodical planning and systematic execution of tactical operations has required adaptation to account for enemies who can manipulate reality through psychic powers that defy conventional military analysis. The Imperial Fists have responded by developing closer cooperation with the Adeptus Astra Telepathica and other Imperial organizations that specialize in combating psychic threats, while modifying their own training programs to include basic anti-psyker techniques and equipment. The chapter's recruitment practices have evolved to accommodate the new strategic realities of the era Indomitus, while maintaining their traditional emphasis on selecting candidates with the mental and physical characteristics necessary for siege warfare. The disruption caused by the Great Rift has affected several of their traditional recruitment worlds, forcing the Imperial Fists to establish new relationships with planetary governments and identify alternative sources of suitable candidates. The chapter's recruiters now place additional emphasis on psychological resilience and adaptability, recognizing that future battle brothers will face challenges that may exceed even the traumatic experiences that shaped previous generations of Imperial Fists. The Phalanx's role as a mobile command center has become increasingly important as the Imperial Fists respond to threats across a galaxy divided by the Great Rift's chaotic influence. The ancient fortress ship's advanced communication systems allow the chapter to maintain contact with scattered Imperial forces while coordinating their own operations across multiple theaters of conflict. Recent upgrades to the Phalanx's systems have incorporated new technologies developed during the Indomitus Crusade, enhancing its capabilities while preserving the ancient systems that have served the chapter faithfully for millennia. The fortress ship's defensive capabilities have been tested repeatedly during recent campaigns as enemy forces seek to eliminate the mobile stronghold that serves as a symbol of Imperial resistance in the galaxy's darkest regions. The Phalanx's void shields and weapon batteries have successfully repelled attacks by Chaos fleets, Orc armadas, and Tyrannid bioships, demonstrating that the ancient vessel remains a formidable combat platform despite its age. The chapter's technical specialists continue to maintain and upgrade the fortress ship systems while preserving the sacred technologies that make it unique among Imperial vessels. Current Imperial Fists operations span multiple theaters of conflict as the chapter responds to threats that require their specialized siege warfare expertise while maintaining their traditional responsibility for Terra's defense. Company strength forces are deployed to critical worlds throughout the Imperium, where their fortress construction and defensive expertise can provide crucial advantages against enemy assault forces. The chapter's ability to rapidly construct fortified positions and coordinate defensive operations has proven invaluable during campaigns where Imperial forces must hold strategic positions against numerically superior enemies. The ongoing conflict against resurgent Chaos forces has required the Imperial Fists to develop new techniques for combating enemies, whose capabilities have been enhanced by millennia of exposure to warp energies and demonic influences. Traitor Space Marine forces equipped with Chaos-corrupted siege equipment and supernatural assault capabilities have forced the chapter to modify their traditional defensive doctrines while developing specialized countermeasures for warp-based threats. These adaptations have required extensive cooperation with the Grey Knights and other Imperial organizations that specialize in combating chaos forces. The emergence of new Tyranid hive fleets has presented the Imperial Fists with biological siege organisms and adaptive assault techniques that operate according to principles fundamentally different from conventional military doctrine. The Tyranids' ability to rapidly evolve countermeasures to Imperial defensive techniques has forced the chapter to develop more flexible approaches to fortress design and siege warfare that emphasize unpredictability and constant adaptation. These innovations have required extensive experimentation and cooperation with Adeptus Mechanicus researchers who can analyze Tyranid biological capabilities and develop technological countermeasures. Recent encounters with advanced orc forces have demonstrated that the Greenskins continue to evolve their siege warfare capabilities based on lessons learned from previous conflicts with Imperial forces. The orcs' development of more sophisticated fortress construction techniques and coordinated assault tactics has required the Imperial Fists to continuously innovate their own approaches while maintaining the systematic methodology that has characterized their warfare since the Great Crusade. The chapter's experience in combating technologically advanced orc forces has provided valuable intelligence for other Imperial organizations facing similar threats. The Imperial Fists' relationship with their successor chapters has evolved to include regular coordination and intelligence sharing that enhances the overall effectiveness of Rogal Dorn's genetic legacy across multiple theaters of operation. The Black Templars' crusading operations provide valuable intelligence about enemy capabilities and movements, while the Crimson Fist's defensive expertise contributes to the development of new fortification techniques and siege warfare innovations. This cooperation allows the Imperial Fists to leverage the capabilities of their genetic descendants while maintaining their own focus on the specific challenges of defending Terra and conducting major siege operations. The chapter's technological innovations during recent campaigns have contributed to the broader Imperial war effort through sharing with other Space Marine chapters and Imperial Guard formations that face similar tactical challenges. Their expertise in siege warfare and defensive construction has proven valuable for establishing secure bases and fortified positions throughout the galaxy, while their experience in combating diverse enemy types provides practical guidance for forces that lack their specialized training and equipment. The chapter's commitment to preserving and transmitting tactical knowledge ensures that their hard-won expertise continues to benefit the Imperium's defensive capabilities across multiple theaters of operation. As the 42nd millennium dawns and the galaxy remains split by the Great Rift's chaotic influence, the Imperial Fists stand as enduring symbols of humanity's determination to survive in a universe that offers only war. Their fortress monasteries and mobile strongholds continue to serve as bastions of Imperial authority in regions where chaos and darkness threaten to overwhelm the light of human civilization. The chapter's unwavering dedication to duty and their mastery of siege warfare ensure that they will continue to serve as the Emperor's Praetorians, defending humanity's greatest treasures while standing ready to face whatever new threats emerge from the galaxy's endless conflicts. The legacy of Rogal Dorn lives on in every Imperial Fist who stands watch upon Terra's walls, in every siege broken by methodical application of proven tactics, and in every fortress that rises to protect Imperial citizens from the galaxy's countless dangers. Their gene seed carries forward the Primarch's unwavering dedication to duty while adapting to meet challenges that even his strategic genius could not have anticipated. In the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war, the Imperial Fists remain humanity's stalwart defenders, their yellow armor a beacon of hope in the endless night that threatens to consume all that the Emperor built. Their watch continues, eternal and unwavering, as it has for 10,000 years and will for 10,000 more.